You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
Shave, please. Well, we sure want to thank you, Mr. Earp. Wyatt Earp. What? You're not by any chance the marshal from Dodge City? Ex-marshal. What are you doing up here?
None of your business.
Why don't you behave yourself? Go on, get out. Go on back where you belong.
I'm not leaving till she gets out of town.
Molly! The railroad. The boom towns. A new life. And the promised land.
The first kiss is always the sweetest. From under a broad sombrero.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature Grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we are getting weird with some sexploitation and Doris Wishman. So join that sleaze, baby.
We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for 4.5 years. So we have, over 110, 120 bonus episodes waiting for anyone who makes the jump, as well as our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre films, which we have been doing recently. We just covered Crimes of the Future and RRR. So if you're interested in those, again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. And speaking of which, we did have a bunch of people make the jump this week. So let's give them their shout outs here. We had Ben Nadeau make the upgrade from $5 a month to $10 a month and is joining us for the monthly virtual screening that we do in the last Thursday of every month, and a lot of people have been coming to those. We just did a really cool one. We did a Mario Bava film, Lisa and the Devil. Surreal thing to watch with a bunch of people for the first time. We were so confused, but it was great.
Very good.
We also had Josh Grech sign up at $5, Aiden and Drew Chow, Niroman Hakimi bin Nirshashim. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, dude. Marcos Zanchetta, Rick Tracy, Cole Fisher, Cameron Federer, which I think is Cam.
Yeah, that's Cam from Pod About List, baby.
Hey, Cam. Well, welcome.
Nice.
Welcome to the gang. He did tell us that he's been listening to the show a lot recently, so he finally made the jump. We also had... you also could have just messaged me, man. I would have sent you some of the episodes you wanted. But no one else gets that deal. Like Samuel. Thanks for signing up, dude. Gregory Thompson, Hampus Bystrom, and we are still going. PJ Endler, Mr. C700, Daniel, Tyler Perre, Johannes Masid, Henry Ermer, Hermf McDurf, Flower, Daniel Backen. Wow, there was a lot this week. Bradley Watkins, Pizze Jen, and Thomas Potter. So thanks so much to all of you folks for signing up. We appreciate the support and hope you guys are all enjoying those bonus episodes.
Yeah, thank you.
That's the one plug for the week. The other plug, as always, is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you are listening on either one of those platforms, and I see the stats, I know that you are. You can scroll down and give us a good old rating and review on both now. So go and do that. Helps us climb the ranks over at those services and find new listeners. And then the very last plug, as always, is merch. If you like the poster art that based out of Toronto horror artist Trevor Henderson did for the show, you can get that basically put on anything that you can think of, and you guys have thought of a lot of things. We've had people buy pillows, we've had people buy posters, hoodies, shirts, pens, blankets, everything. So if you want a Sleazoids logo somewhere in your house, the link to that is in the description, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com. But that is it for the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I think, if I'm not mistaken, 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks would have heard from us, and we would have done a gargantuan episode with, I mean, they're all big episodes right now.
At this point,
Yes, with our friend Jason Buford. Where we talked about 12 Angry Men from 1957 and the Oxbow Incident from 1953. 2003. We talked Sidney Lumet, William A. Wellman, both starring Henry Fonda, both two very stripped down, tightly directed examinations of the sort of masculine social pressure towards violence, the procedure of mob and frontier justice, and in their own ways, very effective morality plays about the death penalty that are very spare and kind of simply drawn. But it was great going back and going civics class mode with Jason. If you haven't heard that episode, that was fun to talk about 2 weeks ago.
And
over
a
on
good
the main
setup
feed.
For what we're about to talk about today.
Yes,
which we'll get
both.
to.
Yeah, I was gonna say both of these episodes we did actually. We almost planned, so it worked out. We did some Henry Fonda, and then we talked about Henry Fonda in a Western from 1943, and then I went, well, we haven't done a big old, sort of Western mode in a while. So I kind of felt like we should double down on it. So last week over on the Patreon exclusively for the bonus listeners, we went spaghetti Western mode, and we talked not Sergio Leone, not Sergio Corbucci, who we've also done an episode on, but we actually talked about the Italian resistance fighter turned politically charged spaghetti Western filmmaker Sergio Salima, the third Sergio that many don't talk about quite as much. We talked about his film The Big Gun Down from 1966 with Lee Van Cleef, and Face to Face from 1967, both films kind of taking the idea of sort of violent lawmen and liberal academic teachers who come to realize the sort of class realities of violence and war and money, and have very, very dramatic character arcs that like fundamentally change and shape who they are. So if you haven't heard that episode, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast, we went hardcore spaghetti Western mode. And also The Big Gun Down, I think it is talked about as a top tier one, but like Sergio Salima should have more respect on his name. He should be as well known as Corbucci is, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. His craft is really very, very good.
Yeah. But moving on to this week, we have a very special returning guest joining us. He's a friend of the pod and former host of the wonderful Extended Clip podcast, coming out of podcast retirement for one last dirty job. We have Eddie Averill. Eddie, how you doing?
I'm getting too old for this shit.
We're bringing you back in.
Just when I thought I was out.
You guys are always fucking pulling me back in. I was done with podcasting. I was done with movies,
This wretched lifestyle.
But, and then I'm hearing some of these movie podcasts, and I'm like, you know what? We need an old school sheriff to come back and clean up this scene.
Yeah, Eddie. I mean, you're long time friend of the pod, long time listener of the pod, long time. We've guested on each other's shows. You know the drill. The guests bring the double feature with them. So what two films have you brought with you this week? What two films made you want to come out of retirement is the better question.
So these are basically two of the best movies ever. I'm just going to be in full hyperbole mode on this episode, probably. Excellent. Because we truly have two of the best films ever, starring a man who might be my favorite classic Hollywood actor. You have Cary Grant, you have Jimmy Stewart, etc. But Henry Fonda, something about the aw shucks charm and the standing in for the morality of America that he did so many times carries so much weight in his filmography, whether it's Young Mr. Lincoln, 12 Angry Men, The Oxbow Incident, My Darling Clementine, etc. So My Darling Clementine, this is just the peak of the classical Western, in my opinion. There are some weirder ones that I like more, maybe like Wagon Master, but if I want to show someone a classical Western, it's going to be My Darling Clementine. And then you have the revisionist Westerns, and a lot of them, frankly, not that great. But then you have Once Upon a Time in the West, which is like the ultimate international co-production where you have fucking Henry Fonda, Charles Bronson, and Jason Robards in a story by Dario Argento, Bernardo Bertolucci, and Sergio Leone. So it's like this is one of the ultimate films, and you have Henry Fonda using all of that baggage from his representation of America and morality over the decades of his classical Hollywood films and just flipping it on its head. And he is the ultimate bad guy in this movie. One of the most menacing menacing, evil motherfuckers in Western history.
Yeah, and he's having fun with it too.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like something was inside him and he needed to let it out.
He needed to get it out, dude. Because like we've seen like horny Henry Fonda, maybe like playing outside the bounds a little bit. Like the three of us, listeners might not realize this. Josh and Jamie, they're friends outside of the podcast and like do other things. So we'll watch movies together sometimes. And we watched The Lady Eve. And seeing Henry Fonda, horniness embodied in that movie and the aw shucks
one of the most
charm
down bad men ever been depicted on screen. Barbara Stanwyck just dancing circles around him. Yeah,
it's so funny, but like the way that he is dominated in that film becomes the complete opposite, where he's the most domineering, menacing, oppressive force in Western history in Once Upon a Time in the West. And and the scenes with him and Claudia Cardinal are just some of the most uncomfortable things you'll see, Yeah. So these are just two all-timers. Let's fucking do it.
Yeah. What do you want to start with, Eddie? Do you want to start with My Darling Clementine, or do you want to start with Once Upon a Time in the West? Because I didn't know the order you wanted to do.
So I had figured we go classical and then revisionism, but the thing is, I think I want to do Once Upon a Time in the West first, so that when we get to My Darling Clementine, we'll be able to call back to all the things that Leone,
made
took
Fonda
into
do.
account. Yeah, exactly. Like took into account in the history of Westerns and everything. So we'll talk about the fun, violent, brooding one first, and then the classical one. I think we'll see how it shaped the future afterwards. So let's start with the Leone.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, let's talk Once Upon a Time in the West.
In a new land, in a new kind of Western.
All right, we are talking Once Upon a Time in the West, the 1968 epic Italian spaghetti western film directed by Sergio Leone and co-written by a who's who of the Italian filmmaking dream team legends, Sergio Donati, who did, which is perfect because he was actually the co-writer of The Big Gun Down, which we just talked about last week.
Nice.
Dario Argento, he's very sort of like left-leaning, sort of like Marxist Western writer. He also did Raw Deal with Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is always a great little tidbit I love to bring up because it's such a strange film to have written that. Dario Argento, obviously, Suspiria, Deep Red, and Bernardo Bertolucci, the conformist in The Last Emperor in this film, stars Henry Fonda, Claudio Cardinal, Charles Bronson, and Jason Robards. And this is only our second time talking about Sergio Leone, because we've done some other spaghetti western stuff. Obviously, we talked about Selima. We did Corbucci when we talked about The Great Silence and Django, which are both incredible films. But we've only previously covered A Fistful of Dollars, so we haven't done a huge Leone episode or a huge like Leone breakdown. And so in researching Leone, I found some really interesting sort of tidbits that I never knew about him, which was that, obviously the big one, everybody knows the man was born in Rome. And his father was a silent film director, and he was classmates actually with Ennio Morricone when they were children, and who went on to basically score 90% of Italian Westerns, including every single one that we've basically covered on this show, and elevating even some of the lesser known ones, like things like The Return of Ringo. But essentially, Leone, while a teenager, he dropped out of law school to work on film sets, which is the move. That's just the move everyone should make.
That's sick.
And he was an assistant.
I literally dropped out of grad school to work on film sets, and I kind of feel like Sergio Leone.
Yeah, Eddie, you are the next Sergio Leone. You're feeling like the
Yes.
American Sergio Leone. But yeah, he did that to work on Bicycle Thieves in 1948, and then in the 50s went on to help write some big sword and sandals epics, which are basically all Italian directors were making at the time until they became unpopular and had to move over to the Western. But he eventually landed himself as an assistant director working on American co-productions that were being shot in Rome, things like Ben-Hur. And eventually he got his debut film, The Colossus of the Rhodes, based on that. So, you know, the huge sort of historical epics is actually where he got his start, which was actually very revealing when you go and you move into his films and you see that, you know, there is a little bit of that sensibility to what he did with the spaghetti Western style, which he is a lot of time credited with, you know, not exclusively, but, you know, basically inventing for all intents and purposes, and then inspiring a bunch of other filmmakers to work within that mode, which was essentially using and borrowing this mythic Western iconography and landscapes and history, and using them as an easy access point to very violent, engaging, epic stories that then, through style, almost exclusively, you could make them feel incredibly operatic and dreamlike, and painterly wide compositions of the West and extreme close-ups of these sweaty, dirty men, creating these worlds that, you know, have a huge depth of feeling, but are also grounded in, you know, the really dirty textures of these greedy loners and killers, and, you know, all of these unshaved, brutal men who, you know, they might make an honorable choice or they might kill a child. You're not sure what they're going to do scene to scene.
Yeah. And he really just stews in the suspense. Like, there's so many just long scenes of people staring at each other and just the camera slowly panning over as it reveals more people that are going to be involved in the fight that's to come. But 9 times out of 10, it's like, you know, 1 minute of gunfighting and 10 minutes of just incredibly suspenseful setup. And I love that. Like, and it does accent just kind of like their location. You can see around them, there's really not much to do. It would kind of be very slow and boring throughout the day. And he accents that in such a way that I absolutely love.
Yeah, I mean, talk about fucking making slow and boring things into suspense. You get the cold open of this movie where the amount of work that the wind is doing is incredible. Just like sound. Adding to the sound
creaks
design.
Of the door hinges and like the boots on the you know, the cracking wood, and it's the screeching chalk.
Yeah.
So for those who haven't seen it, you know, we open on 3 guys holding up a train station, you know, and if it's your first time watching it, you don't know exactly why they're waiting for the train to come, but they are waiting, and you are waiting too. And this is a film with some of the best music ever by Ennio Morricone, but like it doesn't come in until 10 minutes in.
Right.
Yep.
And so you
all
just
sound design off the start.
Yeah, you just get this incredible soundscape of, you know, you have a leaky ceiling and you have the wind, you know, blowing stuff open and shut, and you have the rustling of everything and that creaking, and each of these 3 guys has their little business to do while they're waiting.
Fly buzzing on his face that won't leave, that he keeps trying to like slap away.
So good, dude. The fly is just on his lower lip, and just like, how did he put honey on his lower lip or something?
I think that was what I read. Yeah, like they actually did put something to attract the fly.
I also love what they do when he cuts away from the fly, because he has to get to that point where he puts the gun barrel over the fly. And what they do is it looked like they took a dead fly and like put a string on it and just kind of made it go up the wooden side of the bench that he's sitting on. And it's just such a cool effect after you see him, you know, fuck with the fly for like a good 5 minutes. And it is a real fly, like you were saying. They used, I guess, honey or something. But then they transfer it over to the side and kind of use this little effect that I really appreciated.
And then there's the leaky ceiling, and the guy is just getting rained on. You see that for like a 15-second unbroken shot, and then he's like, okay, I'll make use of this. And he just like makes
drinks
a bucket
it from
out
his
of
hat,
his
right?
hat. Yeah, and it just like cools up on the top of his hat, and then he drinks it. And that's like 3 different shots. You know, you're cutting between these 3 guys, and I just love like the process of each of their little business while waiting for this meeting.
Yeah, I love how methodical and wordless and kind of ambient, and just the patience of it, how filled with waiting and with doom the quality that Leone fills this with before you know actually like why it's important. This feels huge. Yeah. And like and ultimately this does end up being like a kind of like an intimate character story, but it also has this in my mind, it has this very kind of funeral approach to the way that it tackles the genre and the imagery that it uses and everything like that, because ultimately like we'll break down as we go through it, but like this is like just the story of essentially like three outlaws waging war on this battlefield of, you know, where in the background you have, you know, the ideas of people fighting over land and money and quote unquote progress, but it's really informed by these intimate character situations that are filled with these, you know, very personal feelings, these feelings of revenge and violence, and, you know, these characters realizing that the way that this kind of world is going, that maybe these outlaws don't necessarily belong in it anymore. You have Cheyenne, played by it's Jason Robards.
Yeah, Jason Robards.
Yeah, and he's this character who has this very dirty reputation as like a legendary desperado that is actually used against him, and as a result, he's kind of forced to lean into it and be this kind of, you know, this bad guy, even though he is revealed over the course of the film to have a little bit more honor to him than his shaggy beard and terrible table manners would suggest. And then you have Charles Bronson, before his pulp days, which is always a great thing to talk about. We love talking about Charles Bronson in like The Dirty Dozen. Like he was a really interesting actor around this time.
Oh yeah. I mean, he was in Westerns for a minute. Like he was in Delmer Dave's Jubal, and his character in that is named Reb. Which is just one of the great character names, Reb and Jubal, riding around the Old West. That, like, just seeing him in classic Hollywood Westerns before he went full pulp mode is insane to me, because he's just such an interesting actor.
Yeah, he has a real just, like, stern confidence to him, and they really take advantage of it in this, because a lot of what this is him playing this kind of, like, ghostly man that's coming back from, it almost seems like from the dead in a way. And a lot of it is just him staring at people, making them feel completely uncomfortable, like something's about to happen.
Yeah, they don't even give him a name. They call him Harmonica. And he's like a walking atmospheric reminder of like the savage and lasting damage that characters in the West have done. He does, as Jamie said, he's like a vengeful ghost who his harmonica transcends the diegetic space and like becomes score. And you know,
and calling him a ghost is so apt because of how fucking sneaky he is, dude. The first like 2 hours of this movie, every single scene that he's in, he makes some sort of stealth prank entrance. Like the first time you see him, obviously, is they don't think those three guys who are holding up the train station don't think anyone got off the train, and then the train pulls away and he's revealed there. And then you have him in the barn surprising Claudia Cardinale later on with his harmonica when he's like in the ceiling of the barn almost. And then you have the scene where Jason Robards literally like throws a lamp across the bar to reveal that he's in the corner of the bar. He is a man who makes 100 entrances in this movie, and I love it.
Yeah, and he just like revels in it the entire time. There's another one, I think, when he eventually, I think it's him that does the auction of like $5,000 and everyone's shocked, and he gets to have another moment where he slowly walks down the stairs and reveals that he's been there the whole time. It literally happens like 10 times with this character, and I just absolutely love it every single time. And I also
been hanging out in the
I was gonna say weird
auction.
He's very theatrical, but funny enough, the bit at the auction, it's actually him introducing Cheyenne, because he's actually letting Cheyenne have his introduction. Like he gets to have them where he's just like, yeah, Cheyenne, I'm going to give you a sick ass entrance, like all the ones that I've got so far this time. And it works with the story, because at the point in the auction, like they are, you know, someone needs to outbid for the piece of land that the railroad tycoon is trying to get. And it's so funny. They're just like, does anyone else have any other bids? And he's just like, you know, I mean, I have an outlaw who's worth like $5,000, and like it's the price. He's literally paying the auction with the price on this guy's head. And then you get like the slow boot walk in fucking reveal of him coming down. He's like, the reward is $5,000 for this man. Is that right? And the great line that he gets where he's like, Judas was content for $4,970 less. And he goes, there weren't no dollars in them days. And he's like, but sons of bitches. Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is, if you think about that line more, it's implying that, you know, I guess 30 years would be $30 if you're talking about Jesus's death, and just the relation between time and money and, you know, capitalism taking over time. I mean, these are guys who are all realizing that, as you said, Josh, the outlaw ways are long dead. And it's like, what are you going to use as your weapon, capitalism or violence? And these guys are kind of at a crossroads with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and two, this relates to the third outlaw, because we have Cheyenne, the desperado, we have Harmonica, this guy looking for revenge, and who introduces himself throughout the film with the names of various dead men who were killed by the man he's trying to haunt, and why he is a haunting presence, who is Frank, played by Henry Fonda, who is just a sadistic psychopath willing to see, how can he continue to be a cruel, murderous tool in this new world? He's the one who's actually willing to adapt. And he's like, can I continue to use what I'm good at, murdering people gleefully? And could that be put to work, say, working for a railroad man who is trying to, quote unquote, remove small obstacles from his path, like Claudia Cardinelli's character, like a family, and this woman, Jill, who owns land that she shouldn't own, that they want to build the train tracks through. And yeah, ultimately it does kind of become a story about these outlaws and gunslingers from another time who take their cue and kind of let these other characters build the new world, but we have to have one last final showdown to kind of remove the old terrible things from it. And that's what gives it this kind of last Western kind of vibe to it, which is absolutely like what Leone, when he sat down with Bertolucci and Argento and Donati, again, he came up with the dream team, and it's even reported that they like essentially sat in a room and just watched American Westerns for like months. And they said, we need to make like the last Western, like what is across all of these that we could put together, and we could really wrestle with this history and this genre and make it into this very sort of mournful aftermath almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see that there's a ton just on the wiki page here. There's a ton of film references that they do, including like taking certain shots from, like, for instance, the funeral of the McBains. Apparently, a lot of the shots are borrowed from Shane, I believe, from 1953. So just stuff like that is really cool. Just kind of, I guess, culminating. Like, lots of
John Ford, Iron Horse is in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I thought that was a very cool thing and recognizable too.
Yeah, I mean, there's even the reference to My Darling Clementine when the McBain plot, when Claudia Cardinal first rolls into town, she's like, "Where's Sweetwater?" And then the guy cracks up. He's like, "That they call that Sweetwater." When Henry Fonda rolls into town in the beginning of My Darling Clementine, first he asks about Sweetwater and then is directed to Tombstone after. So just like little references like that, like these dudes. Yeah. This is at a time where European cinephilia was all about, how good were those fucking American movies 20 years ago? And they were right. They were so fucking right. That's the peak of cinema, is classic Hollywood in the 40s, 50s. Like they had the right idea.
Yeah, well, and there was no greater indication too, because I mean, like Leone, obviously he loved Henry Fonda for all kinds of films, and as Eddie mentioned in the intro, like Henry Fonda, in that era, like he stood in for like American goodness. He had a sensitivity to him. He had a boyishness to him.
Josh, remember the trailer that we used? I think it was before the Oxbow incident, and I included a little bit in our intro in the episode. Yeah, and it's just him just being like, "Hi, I'm Henry Fonda. And I just really enjoyed this play, and I read it, and I'm like, I have to be a part of it." Like, he's just this all around
has a good message guy about all Americans should believe in, like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's the lone juror who stands for principles in 12 Angry Men. This dude played Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, exactly.
So
in Young
it's
Mr. Lincoln, there's a scene where he is at a pie judging contest. Like he is holding a fistful of pie in each hand and taking a bite of each and judging
the most
which
American
one is
thing
better.
anyone's ever
And,
shot.
That's right after he gives a speech. Like he's like, he reads the book of the law and he's like, well, that's all it comes down to, right and wrong. And like he is just America as a man, you know.
Yeah.
And to see him in this film is just insane.
Well, that's what's so crazy, because apparently Fonda wasn't that interested in like making more Westerns at this point in his life, but Leone personally went to him and was like, look, I have an idea for you. I have an image for you. If I tell you this image and you're interested. Yeah, and he straight up just describes to him the scene that follows up the train station shootout where Harmonica takes down the 3 guys who are waiting for the train, waiting to kill him in a great little, again, suspenseful shootout. I love when he gets up and again, the shootout lasts like 5 seconds. And then but the scene still continues long past it, because it's just him slowly wounded, getting up and looking at the corpses and dressing himself. And, again, it's very slow and painful and methodical. But then you cut to this farm massacre where Brett McBain and his kids are like shooting pheasants and they're cutting bread. And, he's very excited about the fact that his land is going to be valuable at some point in the new future. And he's just married a woman from New Orleans who's coming into town, and he's sending his kids to go get her from the train, who is Jill, who's played by Claudio Cardinale. But before Jill can even arrive on the train in this farm massacre where we are introduced to Henry Fonda, which is what Leone pitched Fonda on and got Fonda interested, which he was basically like, look, imagine there is a gun and that gun is used to like murder a child on screen. And then we move up and you see his eyes, and it is the icy blue eyes of Henry Fonda, the amazing American, and we want you to look exactly like how people know you. Exactly,
yes, that's the thing. He has
we want to horribly
subvert
subvert your image. Yeah.
He still has this like nice everyday American man smile while he's slaughtering a family, including a child.
Yeah, he's like, one of the first things we want to see in this film is an American symbol of goodness that everyone recognizes. Just absolutely murder an entire family mercilessly, and it's the whole family too. Like it's the little girl, like having the dad hear the gunshot and then look over in the distance at like the little girl as she falls down, and then he's like running towards her and getting shot. That amazing wide shot of them all standing in the bushes and then just slowly revealing themselves, like coming out of it in slow motion and stuff like that. Incredible.
Yeah, they get such
and you can even tell it's Fonda
entrance
before you see his face too. Just the way he walks. Like he has such a unique way of walking and standing that's just like, that's the right posture to have, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I love how the one guy even comes up to him and he's like, well, what are we going to do with this one, Frank? This last kid who's alive. He's like, well, now that you've called me by my name. Raises that gun, the gun becomes this like out of focus handheld shot of the train, and actually the gun sound is connected to the train whistle, like straight up showing you that the progress of this train track is murdering families along the way. Like the corpses are paving the way for it, quite literally in the image making.
It's incredible in that sense. That is one of my favorite cuts in cinema. And also, Josh, what you had said about this being kind of a funeral for all of that, like this is such a perfect time for that, because this is when classic Hollywood cinema is like officially dead at this point. This is 1968. We've seen Bonnie and Clyde at this point. The next year, Peter Fonda will be an easy rider, and counterculture will completely take over studio filmmaking in Hollywood. Even before this, you had Henry Fonda's son Peter Fonda in like some Roger Corman biker gang movies, but like I think that this is just such an appropriately timed movie in that sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's felt too is the interesting aspect of it. Like, again, you have Morricone's grandiose and sort of like lush compositions that are always matching character. We talked about this in the Big Gun Down, but like one of his favorite things to do would be to come up with a motif for a specific character on screen and then constantly just like weave it through in moments, where like they're making an important decision or they are changing. And, so you have Jill, who has this like swelling romantic sort of like fairy tale strings to her character, the one who, sees kind of like the more peaceful world that could exist after these guys are gone. You have harmonica's more like pounding, ominous, like epic guitar sounds that he gets. Cheyenne gets honestly one of my favorites, which is this cheap like bar organ like whistle motif, which is just very playful and very much suits his personality.
Yeah. And it has that like really plucky riff going through it.
Yes.
So good.
Yeah. Well, and it's so cool because the music shows you so much life and personality to these characters when they show up, because the overall vision, the scope of what we're actually seeing these characters walk through and float through is something that's actually very somber and very minimal and very sort of, again, patiently drawn out and paced to like really experience these characters' minds with their images. And again, the sort of the myth and history of it, like how vast the landscapes are, obviously, but also like the sets and like that incredible shot of like Jill coming into the station, for example.
Jeez.
And the part where and she looks for directions inside the train station, and there's this amazing shot that follows her dollying along from the station or from the actual train over to the station as she goes in,
which is already filled with extras and detail and everything, and that's before what you're saying.
Like it's already a big shot, and then it cranes up to reveal the hustle and bustle of the town over top of the train track. Like I've just never seen something that is like a woman getting off a train, and it has never felt this big and rich and filled with for her it's filled with like like a hope for a future, because of the way that she sees it. She's arriving there and she's hopefully going to be starting a new family, and this guy who has property that the train track is going to get built by, and he's going to build a station in a town around it, and he's going to get some money out of that. Like again, there's so much like little people hope going on here, but the outlaws are still just out. Again, she doesn't know it yet, but she's going to arrive and go to that funeral. That entire family has already been massacred, and we already know that too. So like these images are, even the ones where the characters are kind of hopeful are populated with this downer quality.
Yeah, the
way that Morricone's score crescendos as that crane floats over the train station to reveal the whole town is like one of the greatest moments in this film, because of how sad it is too, because it's like this great moment, but it's like, oh, she's about to go find her dead family.
Yeah. You have the endless skies and vistas and possibilities and richness of the West. And then, you have the information that, she's going to go just find all those corpses sitting in the dirt when she, actually makes the trip over there. Because this is the one part they shot for this film in Monument Valley, right? The little cart ride that she takes across. Because it looks totally real.
There's one scene later on that is also her riding in a carriage across Monument Valley. But they shot a little bit in Arizona in Utah for this, and mainly it was at the Cinecittà Studios, which is where they shot all those big Hollywood epics in the late 50s, early 60s that were in Italy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, listeners rather, like if you've seen, Ben-Hur or whatever, like if you want a really great movie about Hollywood in Italy, watch the Vincent Minnelli movie 2 Weeks in Another Town. It's a kind of a backstage Hollywood melodrama about a production there at Cinecittà Studios.
Yeah.
Back to this one though. Sorry.
No problem. But I do like that once again, like this is, because a lot of the Italian Westerns, they couldn't afford to shoot in America. And that was why this is so interesting, is like Leone was popular enough due to the success of the Dollars trilogy that he was offered an American production. And he said, look, I do like a lot of the great Western filmmakers, John Ford, especially, we'll talk about the imagery in Monument Valley and My Darling Clementine. But like, he actually did get to use the incredible rock formations finally. And, again, it feels like the last time someone went there and actually was like, trying to recreate these kinds of shots that from a completely different time that's as Eddie mentioned, like completely outdated and outmoded at this point, but again doing it in these huge incredible scope compositions that just look amazing.
I also love that Morricone he doesn't just treat the characters and like the plotting as something to accent, but just when people are traveling in a big mountain shows, he'll do a giant crescendo just to accent the nature itself and just the beauty of the image. And yeah, I absolutely love that too. And like one particular is when she's going, I guess, to the McBain house, and they just take their time with showing the actual journey there. They don't need to, but it's just so gorgeous, and the music accenting it is amazing.
Yeah, the next thing I love that happens in the movie is Charles Bronson's like old timey torture device that he uses, because there's the dude that he tried to set the meeting up with Frank through, because that opening gun down, you know, he thought he was meeting with Frank. 3 of Frank's boys show up instead, the ones
dressed in Cheyenne's gear to throw him off, which is one of like the best details, because I love that part when he meets Cheyenne and Charles Bronson gets this incredible line where Cheyenne is introduced. He comes into this grubby bar and he comes in where Jill is there, and Jill realizes that, you know, she's not in New Orleans, she's not in the city life, she's in this quiet country life, as the shop owner describes it, where it's just like, you know, we only have a tub to offer you that 3 people already used this morning, and you know, like it's just,
I like that he says that only 3 people have used, as if it's like,
and she's
a
like,
really good
all
deal.
together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you just get like these beardy, grubby looking men kind of all hanging out here, and we get introduced to Cheyenne, who, like, I think in that scene he literally like escapes, and like he escapes like the authorities and runs into this bar and is like hiding out there, and all of his men were kind of late, and he's just like, you know, if you guys weren't, you know, I think he says that you guys were supposed to be my escort, and if I had waited for you I'd be in jail right now. But he realizes when all of his men come in, Charles Bronson does, harmonica, that all of his men were wearing the same dusters for the guys who tried to intercept him at the train, and he goes, I saw 3 of these dusters, they were waiting for me at a train. Inside the dusters there were 3 men. And he's like, so? And he's like, inside the men were 3 bullets.
Yeah, that's an amazing line. But my favorite line of that interaction is actually at the actual gun down in the opening scene, when Bronson sees that there's 3 horses, and he's like, you know, you didn't bring a horse for me. And the guy says, oh, I guess we're 1 short. And then Bronson says, no, you brought 2 too many.
Yeah.
So
Bronson is
dude,
so
Bronson,
good at the one-liners.
not only does
he
Bron
does that in like, what was how am I blanking on this? The 5 movies that we've covered on this show where he gets revenge. Death Wish, yeah. Like, it's just one-liner after one-liner. So to get some real top-tier ones from him in this was fantastic.
I love too that like his prankish.
Go on to kill. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Josh.
Oh no problem. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, it to speak like the opposite of Fonda having all of that baggage beforehand, then watching this as a pulp movie fan, this is the guy who shot the Giggler in Death Wish 3. Like, this is like the ultimate icon as pulp. He shot the Giggler.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah, well, and I love that, like his prankish introductions, he loves counting lines, because there's another part too where Cheyenne goes, you know, it's like, that's a crazy story, harmonica, for 2 reasons. Nobody around these parts got the guts to wear those dusters except Cheyenne's men. And 2, Cheyenne's men don't get killed. That surprise you? And I think he says, well, you know music, and you can count all the way up to 2.
Yes, dude.
And Cheyenne goes, you know, all the way up to 6 if I have to, and pulls out his pulp.
Oh,
so
man.
Good, dude. Yeah,
there's
like,
so many little
this is one of those movies. Yeah, like there's so much like on the grand scale of this movie and the scope and what it means, and also the style and the form, but also like it's just a movie with amazing interaction between people on a very base level. Like, it's an amazing script. Yeah, great dialogue, and you just have these fucking powerhouse actors giving it their all. Like, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and we mentioned the harmonica, but the one thing I love specifically about it is, well, one, how often it just shows up because he's around, and then it becomes this kind of like ghostly where is he thing. But the actual sound design around the harmonica is really cool, because it's not just a dry harmonica that they hear. It's got like reverb and a little bit of delay on it, and it just feels completely otherworldly, like something that they're hearing from like a spirit realm or something like that.
Well, yeah, because it's like it's interacting with the Morricone score, because that's the first note of Ennio Morricone.
Guitars,
Yeah, the first note that you hear of score in this movie is in that first gun down, the 3-on-1, and then it's revealed that it's Bronson playing that note on the harmonica.
Right. Yeah.
And like the interaction between the score around it and his original harmonica riff. And as you said, the guitar riffs that come in around it. So
I think it comes in when you were mentioning when he throws the lantern in his direction and reveals his face in the darkness.
Yeah,
and then you get the harmonica, but then they do like a little and it's just so rock and roll and badass, and it's a great way to just introduce him.
This is 1968, and I think it's a really good year for Ennio Morricone too, because the kind of psych rock and heavy rock influences are coming in, and you have his score for Teorema too, the Pasolini movie, also from '68, which has this like light psych rock romp as one of the soundtrack songs, and it's like just to see him taking in all of these like psych rock and heavy rock influences into his compositions, which were already completely godly, is awesome to me.
And they still really work with this world somehow, because I think before, he would stick with the instruments that would kind of work within the Western realm, like just strings, horns, that kind of stuff, but just to add a distorted electric guitar in the midst of your like very reverbed and kind of atmospheric harmonica. It's just it's such a cool
oh dude, and that operatic singing from the main theme too, which is he loved finding like these just incredible Italian women singers who could just like hit things you shouldn't be able to hit.
They just wail. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and it works really well because, again, it gives you the overall huge emotional feeling of this story that's taking place,
it's
while
like what
also
everyone's feeling but won't express outwardly.
Exactly. Like it is like the larger tapestry of things that you are meant to be feeling, while populating it with like this incredible, like, still making time for like this incredible character detail. Like I love the relationships because again, the larger story here is that this widow, her family was just murdered, and they were murdered to make room for this train that this railroad tycoon is putting through, that Frank is working for. So Frank is this essentially assassin who is trying to, grease the wheels of progress for this rich man, and he's willing to do all of the dirty things that he got famous for and was willing to do, but he's also realizing that he might not need the rich man, that maybe he could kill, maybe take over him, because the rich man is actually kind of physically weak, which is something that they kind of bring up multiple times throughout the film. But also
he has like leukemia and it's deteriorating his body.
Yes. Yeah. So there's this quality of how could someone wield so much power but not actually be like a strong person, like standing in the room. Like it's this very old school, like that's what made a man powerful. That's the world that Frank comes from. But then also you have, again, these two outlaws. You have Cheyenne and you have Harmonica, who have come into town with their own. Cheyenne is honestly just trying to escape and survive. And Harmonica is in town because he has a very personal revenge vendetta against Frank that he is trying to, which we'll get into the details of. But like, that is his mission. And the way that as a result they just cross paths with this larger story of a railroad tycoon trying to kill a widow essentially is totally incidental, but again they filled it with so much great character interactions. One of my favorite is that Cheyenne I think, Eddie, you might have even posted the clip of it on your Twitter, but like Cheyenne is such an outmoded dude that the way that he talks to Jill, you watch it now and you're like, wow, that's just kind of gross. But you watch it here and it's absolutely the point that this guy is like from, this is this way of a man sort of like talking to this woman. He's this dirty guy. It's kind of, the thing that's going to be of the past, as especially we're going to see by the end. But he gets one of the most incredible lines ever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, so in this scene, like, he first is appearing at her house and, like, she still thinks that he killed her family, and he has to convince her that it was actually Henry Fonda, and then she, like, makes him some coffee and they talk a while and you cut away and see some other stuff and then you cut back, and as he's leaving...
I love that bit where she pulls open the drawer and reveals that there's a knife inside, and you can tell that she's totally thinking about stabbing him, and he can see that on her face, and he goes, the world is full of people who hate Cheyenne, and I ain't a mean bastard, except what people make out of me. So if someone's thinking about killing Cheyenne, they're going to fire him up, and it ain't going to be a pretty thing to see.
So they have this kind of heartfelt thing where now she's like not necessarily on his side yet, but she knows that he didn't, kill her family, and she understands more. And as he's walking out, he says, Jill, you remind me of my mother. She was the biggest whore in Alameda and the greatest woman I ever knew. And whoever my father was, whether for a minute or a month, he must have been a happy man.
Yeah.
Love is in the air.
So fucking good, dude.
Like this is the closest this man has ever gotten to being like, you know what? I think I love this woman. She's a beautiful woman, and that's how he describes it.
But when you were talking about the train tycoon and like what means
the train stuff in this movie is some of the
power.
best stuff I've ever seen in any Western, by the way.
Oh, of course. Yeah. But in terms of like what it means to be a powerful man at the time and stuff like that, I love the first scene in the train car between Fonda and him where Henry Fonda sits behind the desk and he asks him how it feels, and he's like, it's almost like holding a gun, except more powerful. And it's like he's immediately considering, the violence versus capitalism thing we were just talking about. And I just love how swagged out Henry Fonda is in that scene, dude. He's chewing dip, and he like leans out the side of the train window to spit it. And then after he clears his mouth of dip, takes out a cigar and lights it. And like, I don't know why. I just thought that was the coolest thing ever.
Even the railroad tycoon is like, did you really have to like massacre the entire family, dude?
Yeah.
And he was just like, well, the best way to scare them is to kill them. Like they're scared best when they're dying.
Yeah, that's it. People scare better when they're dying.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sure they do.
So he'll say something completely cold-blooded like that, but then they'll have the guy who comes on the train, and he gets another incredible line where this guy is like, he comes to tell him, I think, because he's the guy who set up the meeting with Frank and Harmonica, and he's the guy who was being tortured by Charles Bronson to like be like, why did you send these men who were there to kill me and not set up a meeting with Frank? And
with this crank operated torture device straight out of like a 60s Mario Bava movie.
Yes. It's an incredible moment, and it freaks that guy out. So that guy runs back to Henry Fonda to be like, dude, this guy, he means business. He's really coming for you. And Henry Fonda immediately is like, well, why did you come here? You just led him here. And he's like, no, I swear, you can trust me. And Henry Fonda goes, how can I trust a man? And then he points at him who wears a belt and suspenders. A man who can't even trust his own pants.
That's logic right there.
And then he like hops up on those bars and kicks him off the train. The way Fonda pulls off that maneuver is so sick, and he's still so limber for like a fucking old man at this point. It's pretty awesome. But he kicks that guy off the train and then shoots him 5 times on the ground.
Well, and did you notice he shoots him in the suspenders and the belt? He literally shoots those things off of him that he just said were like the reasons he couldn't trust him. Yeah, and also the reason he signaled to kick him off the train and to be like, I don't trust you anymore, is because on the blurry horizon line shot outside the window of the train, he actually does see Charles Bronson's silhouette, his shadow on the ground. And so in that moment he goes, someone followed this guy. I don't know who it is, but someone's here. And so that's why he kills this guy who led them there. And also when he kills him, Cheyenne is like hiding underneath the train, which is just a great bit.
And I like that he's about to warn him about Cheyenne, but he's already made the decision to kill the guy. So he's just like, nope, 3 shots and then he's done. And Cheyenne is still under there. And I think, is this also the moment where they find Bronson up there and bring him in and start talking to him?
This is all like one big train set piece, which is like
huge,
nuts.
30-minute set piece.
It's sweet too, because they actually have the train moving as they're doing dialogue scenes and some of the action scenes, and you can just see like I guess it would be like their version of the green screen as the background is moving, and they also kind of sway the camera a little bit to give you that, they're on tracks and it's kind of moving them that way. So I do really like the
rear
effects.
projection and stuff is great.
Yeah, it's really, really good stuff.
Because it's a good mix of rear projection outside the window and actual footage of the train moving with people doing
for
stunts
the exteriors.
on it,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when they start to get into the action stuff with Cheyenne on the roof, it's
that stuff's amazing.
Oh my god,
crazy, dude! When Cheyenne fucking hangs his boot down to the window, so that one of Fonda's men is like, "Oh, I see his foot up here," and he sticks his head out the window, and then Cheyenne fucking has his gun inside of his
in the
boot.
toes. Yeah.
And I love
and he
that
shoots the dude through this toe. Oh my god, it's so sick.
It's sweet. They have that close up of the boot too, right into the headshot, and then just to let the audience know like what the entire plan was there, they have this awesome wide shot of him actually on the roof of the train as it's moving, and he takes off the shoe off his hand and puts it back on his foot really quick. It's fun and it's just well made.
Well, and the way that he's like, the way that the camera is in like these low angle shots inside the train, they're hearing the footsteps on top, and like you're in with the goons who are like scared of whatever's happening. Yeah, and then a gun will just like shoot through a window and hit someone, and then they'll all go gather at that window, being like, "Who just shot through here?" And then he'll come through the bathroom and then take another stab coming through like a different direction. Like he's always moving, he's always like messing with these guys and scaring them, and yeah, it climaxes with him doing that incredible bait with the boots, which again has a gun in the toes of the boot that shoot this guy in the head.
And it explodes out the toe too. You see like the actual boot explode and like the bullet hole and stuff. It's so cool.
So this train set piece is also a major turning point, not just because how freaking sick it is, but because this is where Charles Bronson and Jason Robards team up. So Bronson has been brought in, Fonda's men have him tied up or whatever. And in their first confrontation, Robards kept saying, you know how to shoot or you just know how to play or whatever. And so then when Bronson's tied up and he sees Robards kicking all those dudes' asses, he's just like, you only know how to shoot or you know how to cut too. And so he uncuts them, and then they team up for the rest of the movie, helping out Claudia Cardinale when they realize how much money there is to be made and how they can make an entire town out of the land that she owns.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I even like just the shots of like all the men working, because half the film in the background you can just see all these men like building the town, because the whole point is that they have to
of extras. It's crazy.
Yeah, they have to like basically like build this train station and this town before the train and the railroad actually gets there. And there's also just lots of shots of the men like building the railroad throughout the film. Like even when they were going past in Monument Valley, the guy actually has to like go through a part where they were building, and they're like, "Hey, go around," and he just like rips right through them, like working on it and stuff like that. So the entire backdrop is again this huge idea of progress and capitalism, as Eddie said, and all of these characters then finding themselves in a very sort of personal war in the middle of it. And yeah, I mean the way that they even like have characters describe it, because like when Robards and Bronson team up, which is like a great moment, because those two start to really respect each other during that set piece where they're like, "Man, you're a pretty good outlaw," like together they're like, "This is pretty cool stuff." and then they both go, "Man, it's pretty easy to track these fucking like greasy money men, eh?" How do they describe it? They say like you have a slime trail like a snail.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So then they just decide that, Frank has got to go. They both have a reason to be like, Frank is framing Cheyenne. Frank has, really, really hurt Bronson. But Bronson wants to see him go, but he doesn't just want to see him go by anyone either. There's one incredible sequence in this, which is so well staged and blows my mind every time I watch it, because it's a shootout from the point of view of Harmonica, who is trying to save Frank from getting shot and murdered by his own men so that he can kill him later.
Yeah.
And that's such a cool dynamic way to film like a town shootout. Like it's such a unique sort of like idiosyncratic way to do that, because you just have Charles Bronson on the second floor of this motel with Claudia Cardinale just naked in the bathtub in the background for most of that scene.
Of course.
And
She's washing herself off because the scene before was her and Henry Fonda in an incredibly disturbing scene that opens on a 90-degree camera tilt, from landscape to portrait.
Yeah, that spins and pulls out, right?
And it looks as if,
it's Fonda on top of her, and it's so disturbing.
Right, and
it's
the way
creepy
that it
as fuck. And that bed, the design of it, ugh.
So the bed is hanging from the ceiling. It's suspended. There's nothing on the ground, and it's covered in a mesh black top, where the first time you see Cardinale laying in it, it just looks like she's wearing a giant veil, which is great symbolism for her husband just passing. But then it just becomes so uncomfortable.
It looks like a jail cell.
When her and Fonda are on it, it's like, oh, she's trapped in there now. Yeah,
and that 90-degree camera spin kind of reveals that, because at first it's clear, like it's just them laying down, and then when it spins, it shows the bars that are around the bed, and it just creates this kind of like prison image. Very dark, and the lighting, isn't very flattering in that scene. It's very like dim and just gross, and very effective.
Yeah, because Frank wants her land. He was killing her family so that he could steal her husband's land, not knowing that he had married someone in secret that she now owns. And this, it poses a complication for him, but one that he is more than happy to once again sadistically, use for his own pleasure in that way. And even just like some of the dirty lines he gets in there, where he's just like, "What a little tramp! Like you would do anything to save your own skin, wouldn't you?" And she even goes like, "Nothing, Frank. Like this is like, she's has to make compromised choices based on just being a woman in the West who's at the whims of all of these violent outlaws who for some reason haven't disappeared yet. So all of that stuff is really disturbing, and then but then you get into things like this shootout that are just like insanely, like as an action film, this is just some of the best. Again, we have that train set piece. You have the suspenders and the belt shooting. That's like a gag. You have the boot gun. You have this entire shootout where Charles Bronson is on the second floor looking out, watching these men. And again, you get that suspenseful build. You get the watching. You get Charles Bronson being like, what are these guys doing? Like, these are clearly Frank's men. And he can tell before Frank does that they are going to betray him. And there's a part where he like shoots a guy through a giant billboard and he falls out of it, like right through it and stuff like that.
So painful. Like Oh, wait, I thought you were talking about the guy that falls through the secondary roof.
I think there's two. I think that guy falls through and like actually breaks through a roof. That's done. It almost looks like it's at a High Plains Drifter.
The guy who's behind that like canvas billboard, who's just like pointing his rifle down that Bronson guns down. Yeah, he falls through, tears through that billboard, and falls however far that is onto the ground. And whoever did that stunt double,
it looks like so painful.
That stunt man got fucked up.
He did.
Unless that's really good dummy work.
Yeah, he folds like pretty much on his upper neck and back, and his legs go over his head. Like it is an unbelievably painful looking stunt move. But it's fantastic. I mean, you really do see him come from the roof to the secondary roof onto the wooden platform, and he just kind of lays there as he should after that move. It's fantastic. And also it's a really good action sequence, but again, he still kind of stews in the suspense. Like a lot of it is Fonda walking around and looking for the people that are about to shoot him. You mentioned that they had the barrel of the gun through the billboard hole that Harmonica notices. There's just a lot of amazing lead up, and they have one of my favorite shots is when it's Frank on the left side on the ground level, and you see one of the guys sneaking up on the roof to try to get an advantageous point to him, and he's just kind of sneaking up behind him on the right. And it's just such a great wide shot. It just delivers all the information you need. Like he's looking for them. Someone's after him. It hasn't quite popped off yet. It's just, it's great suspense.
And even that part when Bronson is on like the second floor, like a balcony at one point, and Fonda notices him. Yeah. And he's just like, well, I guess I won't shoot this guy. This guy's not trying to kill me.
Yeah.
And
not yet.
So at the end of that scene, Claudia Cardinale is like, why the fuck didn't you kill him? Basically, you saved his life. And he's like, no, I didn't. Letting him, not letting him die by his own men's different than saving his life. So then they have their actual showdown where they get a little, some juicy dialogue before you get Bronson's flashback to reveal why he wants to kill him so badly. But he says that
I love how patient he is with that reveal too. Like it makes so it hit so hard when it hits, because you feel it, it's there. There's something happening under the surface. You just, again, he doesn't give you the exact information until the actual flashback, and those cuts are so good.
Yeah, and before the flashback, they have that whole dialogue scene where, Bronson tells him he's not much of a businessman, and Fonda just says, just a man. And he says, it's a rare breed. Again, as we move forward in time, people are no longer just men. They are businessmen,
Yeah, and I love that they call it, too, an ancient race is how they refer to it as. Like, these are like the original men, the original violent, impulsive, like we don't belong in an organized society where we're building things and working together. We are only good at one thing, and we're about to do it.
There's also a horse that is like gnawing at Henry Fonda's arm during that whole scene, kinda, and it's kind of like in The Lady Eve when he's proposing to Barbara Stanwyck, and there's like a horse trying to eat his hair the whole time. It's just like hilarious that like at the moment where you're about to get the flashback to Bronson's fucking traumatic story, you have like this horse kind of gnawing at Henry Fonda's arm, and it just made me think about that. But you get the flashback to Bronson's origin story, which is where his brother died at the hands of Henry Fonda, and Henry Fonda put him literally on Bronson's shoulders to hang him and stuffed a harmonica in Bronson's mouth. It said, play for your brother. And that's why he's been carrying that harmonica ever since.
And so literally if he gets tired or he moves, he kills his own brother and is felt, it's basically a form of psychological and emotional torture, giving this kid responsibility for something that he's obvious. It's the original Saw trap. Yeah. He's like, you're going to... It's really horrifying image. That amazing pullout where you can just see like the piece of like round like arch that's there that he's hanging from, and it slowly
it's such a minimal
zooms out.
Set too. It's like that set is just that arch that they're hanging on, and then the background I'm pretty sure is a matte painting, and it feels a little disorienting, but I love that because it's a flashback, and because Bronson, as a kid looks nothing like him too. Charles Bronson's child actor is like a Mexican kid. Like he looks nothing like Charles Bronson, which I think is hilarious because it's just like time has weathered these people so much, and their memories are so affected at this point, and it's this one event, this one traumatic scene that has shaped Charles Bronson's character's entire purpose,
and the entirety of how they feel their environments out, right? Like all of that feeling that we've been getting through the slow builds up and through like the huge harmonica and electric guitar sounds of that feel like rageful, and the huge moment, like even when they're basically admitting like, okay, we're going to have this duel, and at the point of dying, and you're going to know why we're having this duel. And, like Fonda's like taking off his jacket and throwing it into the dust, and you have close-ups of the boots hitting the grounds, and, the house and the landscape, these like rotating point of view wides of them see like eyeballing each other, followed by like these extreme close-ups of their eyes. And again, it's so filled in the way that it's cut and the way that it sounds with Morricone's score with so much history and passion, that then it's so great to finally have it like actually sort of like literally you understand why all of that is there, and then it just snaps right back. They're like, now you know what's in his head. Back to the duel, and he just they both shoot, and you get this moment where you're not sure who's kind of hit who for a second, and Fonda, just trying to put his gun back in his holster, just misses it, falls to his knees, reveals that chest shot in like the slow zoom out, and him framed against the huge blue sky while Bronson like walks into frame on the other side. Being
so good.
It's amazing.
And I love those close-ups you were talking about of the eyes, because Leone will shoot these in normal close-ups where the frame, you know, the top of the frame is like their forehead and the bottom of the frame is their chin. And then from there, he'll do a slow zoom in to where the eyes are the entire frame almost. And it's so beautiful because, you know, there was a problem with scope when they first started using it with close-ups. If you watch the 50s classic Hollywood movies, close-ups can be a little weird in scope because they really only take up the middle third of the frame. But when you zoom in to the point where the entire frame is the eye line, it actually fits perfect into the scope frame. And so when Leone does these extreme close-ups on the eyes, it's just... I think, you know, you think of these giant vistas with scope, but I think those close-ups on the eyes are as good a use of the aspect ratio as there ever has been.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So after that, like Bronson leaves and like there's a really impassioned scene between him and Claudia Cardinale where it's like, yeah, no, he's going to leave because he did his duty, whatever. And then like right after that super long impassioned scene, Jason Robards is just like, well, I got to go too. Which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah, and I love too. Yeah, because he's mortally wounded as well, which is the thing too. And it's so funny that like again, it's filled with so much like larger meaning about like these men don't belong in this world that, you know, she is about to build. You know, like it's a woman inherits the earth kind of, you know, passing of the torch moment that these men are giving her this land that, you know, it is hers. And, you know, but they're saying they're not letting it get stolen by the other men and being like, all those people are killed. Now you do what you want with your land. But he can't help but also be crude. It's this huge emotional moment. And then he's like, he gives her like a slap on the butt. because he gives her this huge thing about how, you know, like all the dirty men out there do all of this work because they get just the vague glimpse of looking at a woman, a beautiful woman like you. Like he gives her a huge speech about that. But it's just funny that like, again, there's this, you know, like the actual moment is obviously a very crude gesture, but this, again, the depth of the feeling makes it feel bigger than that. And also knowing that like, even in his final moments, he can't help but be like the dirty outlaw he's been for his entire life. He still needs to be this, you know, this sort of regressive personality in a way. And I love that when he goes and him and Bronson are kind of going off together and they play his little, you know, playful little organy theme that he gets, and then he falls off his horse and dies. And the music like cuts out like the second that he dies, because again, his, you know, this man is gone. He's not in this world anymore. The romantic sort of fairy tale, dreamier kind of main theme comes back in as we get the shots of, you know, Jill surrounded by all of these men who are building this new town and this world of progress. And, you know, she's giving them all, she brings all the water out to the workers, which is something that Cheyenne told her to do earlier too.
And the train is coming into, so it kind of it shows
they're building it. They built it just in time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's cool too. They have a really awesome POV shot of the train just going along the tracks and all of the workers kind of getting out of the way as it's rolling into the household. It's very cool. I like that. And I also really love the idea of when Cheyenne is talking to Harmonica at the end, and he says, he's like, when they do you in, pray at someone who knows where to shoot. Because he's going through like that kind of gut rot that he got from the shot from the railroad tycoon, I believe.
Yeah.
And I also like that implies,
which we didn't mention, but holy shit, that dolly, that low angle dolly along the train where all the corpses are because Cheyenne murdered them all. Dude, what a shot.
God.
Yeah.
And then that bit when Frank comes back and is seeing this massacre and what happened to his boss. And that bit where his boss basically like drowns in a mud puddle in that like incredible, almost like canted angle a little bit of Fonda standing on the train looking at his boss just die the most like painful, miserable death he's ever seen. Like
as he spits in his direction.
Yeah, and the railroad tycoon just gets like shit on the hardest in this film, because even I think even Fonda at one point describes him as like, you know, when he's outside the train trying to like actually make deals and like make plans and stuff like that, he's just like, you look like a turtle without his shell. And he like at one point literally like kicks his crutch out from underneath him and is like, you don't have power here.
Yeah, and I also like the implication when Cheyenne's talking to Harmonica about the end, that he's like, when they do you in, there's an implication that it's going to be a violent end for him no matter what. It's not like, when you get old and pass away, he's just like, when they kill you, hope that it's a clean shot. It's just, it really speaks to the kind of lifestyle that they know they're going to lead even after this.
Yeah. But yeah, that is Once Upon a Time in the West. So maybe pivoting towards the reductive rating round. Obviously, this is like the big old 5. Easy. Super easy 5. This is, one of the most, again, sort of like moody, ambient, doom-laden, Westerns that's wrestling with all of these old myths that are like violently repeating themselves. It's wrestling not only with the American history, but, of capitalism, but also just these old images that these old American filmmakers used to do all the time. Like, it feels like these characters are in the, very last Western, even though he sort of evades having to actually do that in narrative, if that makes sense. Like he doesn't have to say to you, this is about this, all of these systemic things. He does it in a very small, intimate, personally felt character drama about these outlaws and gunslingers who take their final bow as violent, outmoded men and let the woman, take her land and continue the progress. And it's just filled with so much mourning and despair that's so fantastic. And again, it has this funeral cinematic myth-making vibe to it that's incredibly expressive, and just the actual style itself just blows me away every single time that I watch it. Like nuts. It's the
scale
so stupid,
is just unreal.
Honestly, it's like those moments, because remember when we talked about the finale of The Big Gun Down, that it gets so swept up in those characters' histories and their passions, and the Morricone score swells in it. It almost enters this fatalistic slow motion dream world for like 10 minutes of The Big Gun Down. That is like what the majority of this is, and just how it uses space and how it uses depth of field and the ambient soundscape and the rhythmic cutting and time. And, again, it's beautifully staged and constructed and patient, and just really incredible, and just a great action film and a great character, and like a great expressive character film at the same time. And the only line I have written down that we didn't get to, I wanted to hit: "You don't understand, Jill. People like that have something inside, something to do with death." And that to me is like absolutely what this whole film feels like. It feels like a ghostly, haunted experience. That, these are the last cowboys, the last outlaws, and they spend a final mission taking down one of the most brutal and sadistic and pointlessly sadistic too, which is one of my favorite details about Frank and Henry Fonda, the way that Henry Fonda plays him. Like the fact that he goes down just because for no reason he decided to torture this kid and he gets his comeuppance that way. It's such a great touch. But easy 5.
This is about as easy of a 5 as you could possibly give.
Yeah, absolutely. Big 5 for me too. As soon as the opening scene happened, the first 10 minutes, I'm like, yes, I'm absolutely going to love this. I know that every scene is going to have this kind of suspense and patience and scale. And of course, Morricone's score is just absolutely legendary. I adore the harmonica and the effects they put on it, but still make it within the reality of the world. So it kind of just gives this very spiritual thing that he's doing. And that definitely connects to his character, Harmonica. I just absolutely love this. The colors are unbelievable. Seeing Fonda play against type and not just play against type, but play one of the most sadistic, evil people I've ever seen on screen which was just awesome, especially just seeing 12 Angry Men and the Oxbow incident when he's just like this all-around American trying to do the best he can. And
as we'll see in My Darling Clementine.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. He has lines in this where he looks at a crippled man and says something like, "I bet your life would be better with 2 legs, huh?" Something like that. He's just an absolute cruel man.
He's a savage.
Yeah, absolute savage. 5 out of 5. This is one of the best Westerns I've ever seen.
This was your first time watching it, Jamie?
Yes, this was the first time.
Oh boy, I'm jealous.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah, no, this is an easy 5 for me. From the fucking moment you get that nearly wordless opening to Bronson riding out in the sunset as the train rolls into town and the title comes spiraling at you instead of the traditional end card. Like, it's just 160 minutes of fucking the grandest finale you can possibly have for the Old West, you know? Like, I personally don't think that the revisionist Western is one of my favorite genres. In fact, I think this is one of the only ones I give a 5 to. I'm much more inclined to like the classic Hollywood Westerns of the 40s and 50s, and even of the 30s. But this is just like the ultimate. Like, I would say maybe McCabe and Mrs. Miller I give the 5, and Dead Man is up there with me for sure. But this is easily the most productive, beautiful, suspenseful, and action-packed and just like dense of all of the post-classic Hollywood Westerns, and it's the only one that I would put up there with My Darling Clementine and Wagon Master and stuff like that, like the original classics.
Hell yeah. All right, well, that is going to wrap it up for Once Upon a Time in the West. We are going to be right back, and we're going to be talking about My Darling Clementine.
Pioneer days, the romantic conflicts of men and women who led perilous lives, the lusty humor of those who dared America's frontiers, and the breathtaking beauty of scenes filmed in the magnificence of the great Southwest.
All right, we are back, and we are talking My Darling Clementine, the 1946 American Western film directed by John Ford and based on the 1931 novel Wyatt Earp, Frontier Marshal, which is a sort of semi-fictional biography of the legendary lawman and gambler of the American West named Wyatt Earp, many might know from the show Deadwood, and his subsequent involvement in one of the most famous gunfights in American history at the OK Corral, which is the sort of the structure of the film, even though I would say that for a film advertised around, and actually not even advertised, but like for a film essentially built around a famous shootout, this is like not about the shootout. This is not called the shootout at OK Corral. This is not, it's so fascinating that this was called My Darling Clementine, and that despite the fact that this is a bleak post-war Western in a lot of ways, this is totally about the warmth of its characters and the yearning that they feel. And it's such a passive, relaxed movie in a way that really surprised me the first time I watched it. And I think for some people could maybe, make it seem a little light or slight. But for me, it just is totally not. This is like a top tier Western for me by John Ford. And Jamie, is this our first time talking about John Ford? Do we need Eddie to give us the lowdown here?
Yeah, I think it's the first time we've talked about him because I've only seen Stagecoach, I believe, other than
Great
this
film.
now. Really good.
Man.
But
Forget what I said off mic about another one of my favorite filmmakers that you need to watch, John Ford. That's the priority. That is John Ford, for those who don't know, is the greatest American artist of all time. It's kind of as simple as that, in my opinion.
Well, one thing I noticed, he said that he didn't even want to do this movie, and then you watch it, you're like, this is what you do when you don't want to do a film?
It's one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen.
Yeah.
In black and white, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
and he's like, I'm just going to shit that one out, whatever,
Yeah, because after World War II, he kind of had his eyes on some bigger targets, I think. And so that's why, like, some of Ford's late 40s, mid 40s stuff after the war, other than My Darling Clementine, does feel a little slight, and it's like building toward the 50s where John Ford makes kind of the canon of America in the 50s with films like The Searchers and The Long Gray Line and Wagon Master. These are the films that are American cinema, in my opinion. And so for My Darling Clementine, this one, as you said, it could be perceived as slight, but it's because John Ford, more than any filmmaker, captures the feeling of grace. The gracefulness of poetry runs through his films like nobody else other than maybe Terrence Malick. I think that the scene where the Shakespeare actor forgets his lines and Doc Holliday takes over the to be or not to be speech in the middle of this Western and gives this impassioned recitation of one of the canon Shakespeare works is kind of the essential John Ford scene in a way, because it is, the history of art and American iconography and just gracefulness of life. And, whether you qualify that as God's grace or the way that life just flows as is, I think is just captured in this scene and throughout so many scenes of his filmography. And he's also a guy who just likes to make movies where people fucking joke around, ride horses, and dance their asses off, Yeah. This has one of my favorite John Ford dance scenes, which I think is a very underrated aspect of the Ford canon. People dance their asses off in John Ford films. Like the Chuckawalla Swing is a great one in Wagon Master, but the one at the church here is just incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite things about Ford, because he got started as a silent era actor, including uncredited supposedly in D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. So he was there at like the early moments of like large scale feature film, like actually beginning to be a thing. His older brother was a vaudeville magician who actually broke into the budding film industry while it was just taking off. So as a result, his brother got him some gigs acting, got him some gigs directing. He basically did what are known as some of the earliest Westerns, straight shooting, bucking Broadway, eventually into the 20s, The Iron Horse, Three Bad Men. Like he did so many, like he established what the Western, I guess what you would call the visual cliches and the narrative devices of it. Like he was so huge in developing those as early as the 1910s and one of the pioneers of it. And then went on in the 40s and 50s to make, what are considered the peak of the genre, and when, Hollywood was giving them so much money and they looked beautiful, as Eddie was mentioning, Stagecoach, Ford Apache, Wagon Master, The Searchers. And he was still around making them even in the 60s when the revisionists were just getting started with The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and How the West Was Won and things like that. So this is a man who lived and breathed the Western and knew how to be incredibly expressive with it. And one of my favorite aspects, because one of them was what Eddie was talking about, the fact that he is always invested in the small American lives and these characters and how the depth of their emotion, even when they are being crushed by something larger, which is a huge aspect of his work, his spectacular framing of people and faces against like these amazing vistas and surroundings and mise en scène, very expressive use of them. One of my absolute favorites is in How Green Was My Valley. I always think about the black smoke from the coal mine that the entire town works at and how that makes its way into like the blue skies, almost poisoning them for the families who live above. Like they're constantly aware of the danger that their family is in going, actually into the mines. And then when you get stuff, where like the characters actually do die or get trapped down there, it's really, really painful stuff and beautiful at the same time. So Ford is so good at having, again, these very intimate stories that are, expressive and framed on these larger backdrops that he has here. And the thing, and which we were kind of just saying, which is actually a good connection, we were just saying Leone does that very well as well. But where Leone, I think, really leans into the mood of this more sort of like dour mood to it. I find that Ford took something here that could have been incredibly fatalistic and dour, and in some ways is when we get to the actual shootout stuff that takes place. Right. But he populates it with a counter argument, which is the life of these characters. It's a movie that lives and breathes with these characters, and just has like a lot of fun with them. Like Eddie was talking about the dancing scene, but there's even just the way that he talks about art. One of my favorite sequences in it is the theater actor in the bar, and everyone's sitting there being like, we want this theater actor to do Shakespeare for us, and everyone gets incredibly angry and chaotic when they realize that he doesn't actually show up, and then you go and you see him just performing. He's performing Hamlet, right? Is that what he's doing?
He's doing the To Be or Not to Be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So he's doing To Be or Not to Be, like on a bar table in front of a bunch of guys who just could not appreciate it less. And that, to me, in a lot of ways speaks to, Ford's belief in, as Eddie was putting it, like these grace and humanity and art and all of these things, and finding room for them where other people might not.
Yeah, no, I mean, in that scene, John Ford is the fucking the shithouse Shakespeare, like he's just like taking these dirty Western boys and showing the true poetry that they got. Speaking of revision Westerns, it's like John Ford's whole Western career is like that scene in McCabe and Mrs. Miller where Warren Beatty's freaking out and he's like, I got poetry in me, damn it.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to mention just at the very beginning, which I adored, loved it, was the way they do the credits on the spinning wooden signs.
On the signposts.
It's so precise and so smooth the way the camera just moves about all of the different signs in the credits. And I was wondering if there's more. Is that a Ford thing? Does he do that often with this kind of stylized credit sequence?
His credits are often pretty traditional, they're often like pretty grandiose, obviously. Like it's his 40s and 50s films have those classic Hollywood opening title sequences. But he does mess with the form a little bit. Like in this, it is like a scene where you're the camera is tracking across all these signposts. He has one of the earlier cold opens that I can remember in Wagon Master, where you just have these unnamed characters holding up a saloon and shooting people, and then the opening credits roll. And that's like a 50s movie where it's like, oh, I had never seen that kind of shit in like a classic Western, So Ford is always kind of toying with the formula, but the thing is, he is a classical filmmaker at his heart because he was there since they started. And he just finds perfect compositions and perfect cuts and stuff like that. He's truly a perfectionist. You watch his movies and maybe you think the form, like the untrained eye might find his form kind of standard, but his style is so precise. When the studio would ask for specific coverage and mandate it, if there was a producer on set, he would literally hold his hand over the lens so that they didn't get coverage that he didn't want. Like studios would be like, oh no, you need a close-up for that. He's like, yeah, sure. And he would just fucking put his hand over the lens so that they didn't get the close-up.
What a badass.
He absolutely knew how he wanted to shoot and construct that stuff, and you feel that basically like right away, especially in like very precise moments where like a character is really meant to be feeling something. There's great shadows in silhouette work. There is amazing close-ups when he actually does decide
of course
to do them. But I do also just love, because Jamie was talking about the opening credits, and obviously there's the iconic use of the folk ballad that the film is actually named after in this, which is the Billboard Top 100 banger of 1884. Oh my darling Clementine, just this guy going, oh my darling, oh my darling. It's incredible. It gets stuck in your head the second you listen to it, and honestly, on rewatch, it doesn't actually play that much in the film. I realized
it's just
that
the opening and closing, I think, right?
Yeah, and it's not even that long. Like, it's actually like very, like it's very short, and like the theme repurposes, and I think your brain just kind of does the rest of the work. You just fill in the lyrics once they teach them to you after the opening.
I'm pretty sure in the closing, when it ends with the one note, it's just the line, "My darling Clementine," and that's it, and then it just ends. So it's just kind of a exclamation point a little bit the way they use it.
That ending. We'll get to the ending.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
But obviously, for anyone who hasn't seen it, this obviously once again stars Henry Fonda, but in one of his more traditional roles that he got known for, playing Wyatt Earp. And he's a cattle herder near outside Tombstone, Arizona in 1882, driving a bunch of cattle to California with his brothers, the famous Earp brothers, where they come across an old man by the name of Clanton, who arrives in typical fashion, dark hat, dark clothes versus Fonda's light white cap, and he tries to buy the cattle off him for cheap, but he refuses because he knows that if he makes it to California, he can sell them for more. And as in typical John Ford fashion, he's doing this awesome like day for night kind of photography that gives everything this like constant kind of dusk quality to it, and again framed against these amazing landscapes and horizons filled with these characters kind of imagining what's next for them
at night. The day for night cloud work is just incredible. You never see exterior night scenes with clouds like that, and it's just it contributes to the almost unreality and myth making of it all. You know, you get to a later John Ford film like The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, and the whole thing about printing the legend and how it's all about mythologizing the Old West. He's already working at those ideas in My Darling Clementine.
Yeah.
There's even a line where he says, "You'll be the man who shot Wyatt Earp."
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's another part too where the character, I don't know why I'm blanking on his name right now, Doc Holliday, played by Victor Mature. When Doc Holliday, at one point, he is, you know, we'll get into it, but he's a pretty self-destructive guy for a very specific reason. And there's a part where he gets really drunk and wants to get into a gunfight, and he literally just like completely wasted pulls out his gun and wants to challenge anyone to a fight. And literally Henry Fonda's Wyatt Earp goes like, why would you make this easy for them? There's so many people who would step up to be like, I'm going to be the guy who killed Doc Holliday.
That's what it was. Yeah, the man who shot Doc Holliday, not Wyatt Earp. Yeah.
He wants to be you know, like who wants to be the famous guy who killed this legendary outlaw character. And yeah, he goes like, why? But also, again, it's invested in like the personal reality of that, where he's basically just like, you know, like, why do you want to be that guy? Like, why do you want to be some guy who just gets killed? Yeah, like why do you want to be killed so that some other dude can pad his stats? Is literally what he says to him.
Exactly.
He's like, don't you have more ambition, or don't you have more in you than that? And yeah, I mean, like that's always something that Ford seems to be really considerate in his characters, is how much these people can feel and how much value that has.
Yeah, and
versus these greedy outsiders who are basically like, they don't have any, feelings towards human life. They're like, whatever, we'll just kill Wyatt Earp's brother, for example, and steal all of his cattle because he wouldn't sell them to us.
And I love
that reveal is incredible when it's raining and the black and white just looks so good.
Dude, that shot of the horse and the corpse.
Yeah, it's
incredible.
The rain looks so thick, and it makes because of the black and white photography, it makes every puddle just look black, and it just feels so dark and sad. It's like a hauntingly beautiful image in a way.
So this is when the youngest of the brothers, James, gets killed by Walter Brennan's gang, the Clanton boys. Old Man Clanton is, of course, played by Walter Brennan, who is, if you haven't seen him in other movies, he's like the greatest character actor in classic Hollywood movies. And he actually hated John Ford. They beefed heavy on this set because he could not fucking ride a horse. And Ford is just like, what do you mean you can't ride a horse?
Yeah, most people should know Brennan, I assume, as because we've talked about him. I think we've mentioned him a couple times,
right?
Because we do Rio Bravo. He's stumpy. He's incredible in that.
Oh, I brought me some dynamite.
Yeah,
that was pretty good.
But
yeah, he's awesome.
The brotherhood in this. This is a movie about two sets of bros. The Clanton boys and the Earp boys.
Earps.
And when you first meet the Earps, it's so sick. Like, they're all unshaven. They're about to roll into town, and you get a glimpse of James as like the young boy who's cooking for them. And Virgil's like, "You're cooking as good as Ma." And then he pulls out his little Catholic medallion thing, like this weird emerald thing that he has. And Ward Bond playing Morg says, "There goes that chingadera again," which I think is the fact that John Ford got Ward Bond, who's a regular in John Ford movies, to say the Spanish phrase chingadera is fucking hilarious. Just to mean like that thing that I don't know what it is, but it could also be like a dirty word too. But yeah, so like I think that this is such a good film about just like having your boys with you, you know, like it's usually more credited to Hawks, the classic Hollywood Western male camaraderie. But I think the male camaraderie in Ford films is so great too. It's more like, it'll focus more on the individual and the sadness that they encounter, and it's more of a grand scope thing. But he was as good as anybody at male camaraderie films. I mean, look at The Long Gray Line and the dancing and fighting that those fucking army boys are doing in that one, and tell me he's not as good as Hawks as at male camaraderie, you know?
Well, and I love too that ends up becoming partially the structure of this film, is that they arrive into this town of Tombstone for, you know, they're going to get a quick shave and they're going to be on their way, but their James is murdered and their cattle is stolen. And when they're introduced to this town, like he literally goes into the barber to get a shave, and like literally gunshots just start going off and women are screaming, and he's like, what kind of lawless, like chaotic town is this? And literally the structure of this film is that these good-natured boys, these comrades, they come into town, and they literally, through the sheer like just goodness of themselves, start to actually bring some, you know, some peace and civility to this town.
Yeah.
Because so many of these,
let's say some law and order, if you will, which is why
I wasn't going to use those specific words, but thank you, Eddie.
Let's face facts here. The classical Western is something of a conservative genre, and that's why the revisionist Westerns go so hard on it, you know. But I think that's what those are the myths that America was built upon, you know.
It's true.
Yeah, and it's fitting that
it is a very beautiful myth, even if it's not a real thing.
Yeah, of course. And
or if applied really, it does not have the same effect. Like, you do wish at a certain point that, like, yeah, all these greedy dudes who are just murdering people to, you know, for profit, it would be cool if we could just, you know, hang out at a bar and drink, and everyone just, like, you know, started dancing at the local church, and, you know, like,
and
not how it works, but in the world of John Ford's My Darling
this?
Clementine, that is how it works.
I love how Fond just over and over is like, what kind of a town is this? And it's like a great way to introduce the town and all the side characters that pop up. And Indian Charlie, that's who they're having a hard time with.
Yes.
Like, yeah, dude, Indian Charlie's causing a ruckus. And Henry Fonda's like, all right, I guess I'll fucking take over. And he fucking kicks him in the butt. And he's like, get out of town.
I like that Fonda kicks somebody out of something in both movies here, just with a...
Yeah, totally.
Well, I guess the first one was a kick to the chest in Upon the West, but this one's a kick to the ass.
So then he takes over marshaling, and I love how after he finds James is dead and he sees Walter Brennan again, he's like, yeah, got myself a job marshaling. And so at his first stop after getting the job of the marshal and his brothers as his deputy, which I love that that's his one guarantee in his contract. He's like, yeah, I'll be the marshal only if my brothers can be my deputies, which is just that's sick.
It's so invested in like these personal relationships as a counterpoint to like these people who don't have them and instead just operate in like the, you know, we organize around money and selfishness, and like these characters are supposed to be it's their personality versus that. Like a moment like when you were talking about when he goes in, because again he's going to get a shave, a totally normal domestic scene, just totally interrupted by bullets flying through that are
into
coming.
The mirror.
Yeah, that are literally coming through the building. So that when he goes in to go and get the guy to kick him out of the bar, the guy who's drinking, there's a part too where he like goes up the steps to go sneak up behind him, and he goes through the window, and women just start screaming, and he's like, "Sorry, ladies," you know, like,
yeah,
like there's so much strange side detail of life and stuff that are just happening all the time that is so good.
Like I like the way that Fonda presents himself when he's got the outfit on. You know, I think he's become the actual marshal of the town and all of that, and he's just sitting on that chair with his hat over his face, and he's just kind of like playing he's kind of balancing the chair with a post that he's in front of, and he's just got this very chill attitude about him, like he's there trying to help people, and he's a relaxed man, he's composed, and I really love that image, but then there's also like some moments too where when he goes into the town, he's playing poker, and who is the woman? Her name is
Chihuahua.
Played by Linda Darnell.
Yeah, and she's great. And she looks at his
dude. She's
cards.
So good. I was funny. I mentioned it, I think, in the Sergio Salima episode because Dana Andrews was in. Oh no, sorry, in the episode with Jason, because Dana Andrews is the guy who gets killed in the Oxbow incident. He's the guy who gets hanged, she is opposite him in like the very seductive femme fatale character in Fallen Angel. By Otto Preminger, and she's so good in that film. I just saw that on a print like a couple months ago, and I was totally blown away by her in it. I was like, "Who is this woman?"
Yeah.
No, I love that the poker is great because it's his first act as Marshal. He's like, all right, first stop of business, who runs the gambling around this town? And so he goes and plays poker with them, and Chihuahua is helping out this dude cheating a little bit. And so he fucking just like dunks her in the water like trough outside the bar. It's so funny. Oh my God. And he just like holds her head under there for a bit too.
And I love it's not like it's not a contradiction of his character at all. I think he's just trying to like lay down the law in that moment. But it is funny to see him go from like balancing on the post to throwing a woman in a trough. It's just it's very, very funny.
So well, really and
also he's supposed to be really good-hearted.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, a big chunk of this film is just that first night of him as the Marshal, where it's him playing poker, he meets Doc Holliday, the Clanton boys mess with him again, you have the Shakespeare guys. Dude, when the Clanton boys mess with him and they pull guns and then they walk away, and then Walter Brennan comes in and starts whipping his children, and he's like, when you pull a gun, kill a man. And my God, dude, so hardcore.
Really
that
establishes
is like
the relationship of the family that they have there.
Yeah, because Walter Brennan is just such a goofy dude usually. It's almost like a mini version of Fonda playing against type in Once Upon a Time in the West. Seeing Brennan as like this evil motherfucker in My Darling Clementine rules. And it's more fitting because Walter Brennan, avowed racist and huge supporter of the Ku Klux Klan, apparently.
Damn.
Yeah, he was not the warm, friendly, goofy old man that the movies made him out to be.
I guess not.
But it's the next morning that Wyatt Earp strikes his famous pose where he like leans back in the chair and leans on one leg against the post, and he returns to that pose a couple times, even playing a game once with it, like where he's alternating legs, which is awesome. Yeah. But then Clementine rolls up, her introduction, you know, and when she rolls up, he springs up from that pose straight as an arrow. Boing, 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 boing.
Yep, you can almost hear it. Yeah. Well, and two, I really like, because on that first day that we've been talking about, he basically is trying to, through sheer small acts of, you know, just humanity, trying to, you know, fight off the, like, just the palpable hostility and fear and chaos of this town. Like, that theater sequence is one of my favorites, specifically because the presenter gets up there to be like, sorry, the performance is not going on, the billing was wrong, the guy is getting drunk at a bar again, and everyone starts like freaking out. And straight up, they're just like, the guy who lied to us on the poster outside, we're gonna string him up and ride him around town a couple times. You know, that's their response to being cheated in the advertising by this guy. And also the characters are like cheating at poker.
You can ride him around town once on a post.
Yes.
You know? He's like, I think that's fair. One time around town is fair.
Yeah, and like they catch them like cheating at poker and everything too. I mean, I even love that Fonda's response to that is sure is hard to a hard town to have a quiet game of poker in. He almost says it in like Fargo speak. This is how like corny his kind of goodness is, and he's just like, can't believe that people would cheat at fucking card games. And and then when he meets Doc Holliday and he comes in, and Doc Holliday just sucks the air out of a room. He just controls a room because that's how much power.
Yeah, Victor Mature, and this is the best I've ever seen him. He kind of has a Robert Mitchum quality in this role specifically.
Yes. Yeah.
Just a understated, really rough exterior, but an understated sadness within that obviously comes out throughout the movie in huge doses. But he gets
some of the best stuff in the film.
Yeah,
honestly.
absolutely. I mean,
because we're introduced to him as like a dark figure, a powerful figure, which is something I a lot of times associate Mitchum with. And, like I think about Night of the Hunter, and he talks about like, you left your mark in Deadwood. A man could follow your trail going graveyard to graveyard. Speaking once again of men following each other on trails, just not slime trails in this one. But yes, Ed straight up, his response to that is like, yeah, and the one here is the biggest one. What if I took you out there? And you do wonder at a certain point, like this guy is incredibly dark. He has inner turmoil. He's very visibly sick. There's something kind of going on behind the scenes with him. And when the reveal of that stuff, I think is some of the most powerful stuff in the film, when Clementine shows up in town and we're introduced to her, again, very bubbly. And we, Fonda is immediately taken with her and just her presence and the way that she looks. And she comes in and she goes, I am looking for John Holiday. I am looking, and he's like, what the fuck? Why is she looking for like clearly like the meanest guy in town?
And it turns out crazy dude.
Yeah, and it turns out that he fled Boston because he is dying of tuberculosis, as we kind of got small hints of, and his world was ending, so he decided that he was just going to leave here, and he fled across the country, and so now she is basically scouring mining town to mining town, looking for him, which is obviously a huge gesture, like a romantic gesture, and he does frame that in this incredible 2-shot where you see like half their faces and the other half are like covered in shadows, where she is straight up telling him like, you have no right to like drink yourself to death and destroy yourself when there are people who love you. Like, and it's a really impassioned moment where you realize his chaos and his reputation as an outlaw. It's sort of like the stuff with Cheyenne. Like, he's really well known as this figure of chaos and violence, but we are led here to know that they are clearly an extension and an expression of these internal pain and feelings that he has, which are then expressed in that amazing shot of him drinking alone in his room and hearing the music and dancing and hooting from below. And he's just, sitting in his loneliness and he's looking at his own reflection in his doctorate.
Yeah.
And he throws the whiskey glass into it, like shattering his own reflection and stuff. Like it's so interesting that people will talk about John Ford and, they will be like, he had very basic shot construction with the wides and stuff like that. But, every once in a while he could get really stylish when he wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was always just on it with the style. I really think he's the great visual filmmaker of classic Hollywood. I mean, he's just my favorite filmmaker, so I have a bias there. But I think it's really interesting because the lightness of the small town characters, as we said before, is always going to balance out the darkness of the interiors. When Clem rolls into town and you have those confrontations between her and Doc Holliday where she's like, get your shit together, you also have more of just exploring the town a little bit from the Earp side of things. And so at this point, Wyatt Earp goes to the barber again and gets his shit fucked up, dude. The barber fucks up his lineup so hard. It's so funny. And he just wears a hat for most of the rest of the movie. He checks in with his boys, his brothers, which one of the funniest lines in this movie that I had never really noticed why, but like now I think is so funny is when after he meets Clementine, his brothers come out and he asks them what they were up to. Did you guys eat breakfast? And Ward Bond says, ate a whole mess of ham and eggs. We did good. And I just think him saying we did good in terms of eating a lot of breakfast is like really funny and very just like, it's so classic for these just like down home, yes ma'am, good old boys who are going to clean up this old West town. Like they're just going to eat a big mess of breakfast and go see what they can do to help fix up Tombstone, Yeah,
man, these fellows are dreaming big.
Yeah.
Also, I like to think about how frustrating it would be to be the bartender in this in this town, because there's so many moments where people just walk in, get upset, smash a glass, throw a glass across the room. He's just kind of be like, guys, my inventory, holy hell, right now. Yeah.
I don't even have like a busboy.
Well, he also gets one of my favorite. He gets one of my favorite lines in the entire film, which is when someone goes up to the bartender and he's like, Mac, have you ever been in love? I think Henry Fonda asks him, and he says, nope. I've been a bartender all my life.
It's so good.
Ever since I was 6.
Like, I love this. Like, the really small character interactions in this are like really what like really are what send this one over the top for me, because again, the fact that it is engaging with its characters on such a human level like this, and with so much
sweet moments
warmth
a lot of the time
and generosity, like this movie wants to spend time with these people, have them develop respect and emotion for one another. Like this is a counterpoint, an expression of passion and life in the face of this like horrifying bleakness and lawlessness and cowardice and, you know, murder and everything that's kind of popping up along the periphery. And it's so cool just how he doesn't have to once again go out and just state that. He just lives with these characters as that happens. Like when those churchgoers just like ride into town and they're like, hey, maybe there are some good people around here. This guy just wants to go and dance. And as Eddie was talking about, the dance sequence in this is amazing. Henry Fonda, those knees are going high, brother.
Oh my God, dude. Henry Fonda taking Clementine to the church, like the pensiveness as he wants to ask her.
Yes.
Escort her is so amazing.
He looks like he's passing a kidney stone, like waiting to see if she wants if he wants to ask her to dance or not.
If you watch her too, as she's kind of waiting for him, she emotes very much like, I'm waiting, like, come on, I'm kind of excited to do this. And when he eventually gets the courage to do it, she's like ecstatic to do it. So I love their back and forth there. And I like also just the shot.
What I really love is
going up to the church. It's just like very, you know, it's a very big, it's like a wide shot, and you see the big, I think there's like a windmill or something in the middle of it that they're dancing to.
And you actually see the construction being done. You see the singing. Yeah. It's awesome.
You hear the hymn as they're approaching the church. It's very cool.
Yeah, the two big American flags with the big wooden platform is just an amazing image right there. I also love that he kind of turns on a dime his idea of the church because of Clementine. Because when he first meets those people, like, he's nice about it, but him and his brothers are very dismissive once they leave, you know? And then when Clementine's like, are you going to go to the service? He's like, yeah, of course I was going to go to the service. It just being religious to try to get just a whiff of pussy, you know, a tale as old as time. John Ford, that's why he's the great American poet.
Yep.
So they go up there and he dances, and it's just so amazing because everyone's dancing, but the church guy's just like, whoa, hold on, clear the dance floor. We got motherfucking Marshal Wyatt Earp coming up here dancing with his lady friend, you know.
Yeah, and by golly,
it's just so awesome. And yeah, dude, his dancing is awesome. I love how high those knees are kicking up, and the way
dude, straight up, I was watching it with a friend, and we were both like, man, look at this man go. Like, he is going off on these dance moves.
Moments like these are so relieving too, because, you know, what we are looking at overall is the reason that they're there is because their brother was killed, you know, and then
you honestly forget. There's so much life and warmth in the film. You honestly forget for a while why they're still there.
Yes, absolutely. It's like they almost just get used to the town like you do as an audience, and then things of course start to come up to the top and explode. But it's a matter of he just cares about his characters. He doesn't want to constantly torture them, even when they're going through something incredibly devastating that they're going through right now. There's moments of like levity, which is great.
Yeah, well, I think that's great because like, you know, right away that when his brother is killed and he decides to take the job as the marshal, and he's talking to Clanton, where he's basically like, yeah, you were right, I didn't get very far, Mr. Clanton. My cows were rustled this evening, and then he says that he got himself a job, and he asks him if it was for cow punching, and then he was like, no, I got it for marshaling, and he's like, in Tombstone? Ha! and so like you set up, you know where this is all going on the periphery. Like, you know that these guys are going to get into the gunfight at the OK Corral. You know it the entire time. You go into this movie kind of assuming that you know that is coming. And Fonda even gets a beautiful moment that we forgot to mention, where he builds a grave and he talks to his dead brother's grave, like framed against the valley, which is like just really beautiful. Where he kind of states some of the ideas, where he's like, you know, I'm going to be around here for a while, can't tell, but maybe when we leave this country, young kids like you will be able to grow up and like actually live safe and actually live life, and, you know, like, hopefully that happens. And over the course of the film, once again, like, he's just developing these personal relationships and getting very involved with these people, and it doesn't come back until after this dance scene. Like, you spend that that moment where he's in town, he doesn't actually spend a lot of investigating. He spends it just marshaling the town and having a good time and trying to clean up the town. So you actually don't come back to this element of the film of him, you know, finding out who killed his brother and getting revenge for it until this dance happens and Doc Holliday gets really offended that, you know, his fiance is dancing with the marshal that he, you know, has kind of a prickly relationship with.
Right.
And Doc Holliday decides to leave town to go to Tucson, and which gets Chihuahua, who, you know, he's kind of Doc Holliday has kind of struck up a relationship temporarily while he's been staying in Tombstone. Gets her really upset because she had plans about them going to Mexico and getting married together.
And it does seem very one-sided. It seems like Chihuahua wants Doc more than Doc wants Chihuahua.
You do really feel for her though, and like that she wants something more than what this town can offer and stuff too.
Yeah,
and
I feel
you know, there is a little bit of like a sort of Madonna horror kind of complex that they're getting at a little bit, where she's like, you know, Clementine is the beautiful, sweet city woman, and Chihuahua is like the one of questionable morals and stuff like that. But
dude, when they meet each other, when Clementine first meets Chihuahua, Chihuahua says, who are you? I'm Doc Holliday's girl, you know? She's very, and it's such a funny, like, slight introduction because it's like, oh, God, she's such a, you know, as Fonda would say in the other movie, what a little tramp. But then it
her singing in that scene
more.
Is awesome, though.
Yeah, no, it fleshes it out more, and you see the true sadness there, and the fact that she's singing the first kiss is always the sweetest under a brown sombrero every night to these fucking drunkards in Tombstone. And then Doc Holliday comes along and he cares. And then once he's so upset he wants to leave town and he's drinking himself to death, she sings again and he's at the bar and he's like, she's singing right in his face and he just doesn't care. And it's so sad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and also the way
stuff
that
is so
Ford
good.
films this stuff, man. Like the when he occasionally goes to the high angle shot,
stuff.
But when he goes to the higher elevation shot inside the bar, and you see that those rows of light fixtures hanging off of it, and just like the symmetry of it, and the quaint beauty of very simple things. Just perfectly framed, and the play of light and dark and shadow in this, I think it's his best looking black and white film, honestly. It is true. And also, you know, look, I love the guy's films, but Quentin Tarantino said that John Ford wasn't good at shooting black and white. He must have seen a colorized version of this movie or something. I don't know what's going on there.
How do you watch this and not think this is some of the best black and white photography you've ever seen? It's truly just rich with detail, and I love the way they use shadows in this. It felt a little more like it felt darker than exactly. It felt more noirish in the sense of just the look of it when it came to westerns. And I'm a little unfamiliar with more classic westerns, but I had no idea that any of them looked like this. So it's I think it's great.
No, I mean,
Tarantino's wild.
The sunrise before the shootout at the OK Corral, where like you see sunrise through a close-up on Walter Brennan, and it's like all you see is his silhouette at first, and then as the sun comes up supposedly off frame, really they're just cranking a light, but his face gets exposed by that light, and that use of light and darkness on a close-up of Walter Brennan waiting to kill these guys is incredible, man. That might be my favorite shot in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite examples of just like the way that he shot this is after he's done the big set piece where he chases Doc down, because I think they catch Chihuahua wearing James Earp's cross necklace, and then
the
they find that on her.
Bond calls it,
Yeah, and she says that Doc gave it to her because she's Doc's girl, and she wouldn't have got it from another man, which it turns out that she did, but she doesn't want to say that, right? Because it's not a nice thing to say. And so he chases down Doc, and there honestly just is this amazing sequence, by the way, because John Ford, Jamie, you have seen Stagecoach, so you know when it comes to like buggy chases and horse chases, and you know like the dusty close-ups on the wheels as they're going the Monument Valley wides. Like God, he's just the speed and the intensity and the framing for this era is really, really impressive. And clearly, I mean, they can't do this shit anymore. Like he was very clearly just running real horses like into the fucking ground.
Dude,
but it looks fucking amazing, and it's gorgeous.
The shot where Billy Clanton shoots into that room. room, because that's when she reveals that one of the Clanton boys gave her the chingadera, as
Yes.
Ward Bod calls it. Then you hear a gunshot, and it's the Clanton boy that she was also seeing on the side. And he sneaks out through the window, and then the shot of like him, he shoots his gun in and actually shoots Chihuahua. You don't even realize that till later. And he then runs through the roof and jumps off the roof and tumbles onto the ground. That is some fucking silent filmmaking. Like, that is the work of a dude who's been in it since the silent days. That dude knows how to shoot action in a classic Hollywood way better than it. Like, maybe Sam Fuller later on in like the 50s, I would say is the only other like classic Hollywood filmmaker who shot action like that.
But one of my favorite moments is actually after the scene that you mentioned, because it's a really brutal scene where she finally tells the truth that she was seeing someone else, and that it was that was the person who killed James, or who was part of the gang, the Clanton brothers who killed him. And she gets murdered for ratting him out, essentially. But my favorite aspect of this, and what led to one of my favorite shots and just sequences in the film, is that they don't immediately actually chase after the guy, because they actually immediately start taking care of her, because this is their vision for how this town should be run. So Doc is there operating on her. And, I think the one brother, Virgil, keeps chasing after him, but Henry Fonda and so Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday stick around to actually make sure that he's okay. And there is just this incredibly sad silhouetted close-up of Henry Fonda with his hat, where you literally can't see his fucking face in the bar. And then it cuts to this wide where they are performing the surgery, and it's honestly almost like a horror moment, the way that it's shot and framed and everything, where they go, okay, like,
it's such low-key lighting.
I do think that there's...
but all of the lighting is on the fixtures above where they're going to operate on her, and not on the rest of the bar. So you get that long framing, but earlier, he loves this shot of like the long frame where the bar is honestly like geometrically running along the entire composition, and he loves to kind of like signal where you should be looking down the eye line at the bar. And there's a scene earlier where he does it, where he's looking at Doc Holliday drinking at the end, and he eventually walks that path and goes up and talks to him. But now it's like that, and the entire bar is unpopulated. It's completely shadowy, and you look down and you just see a crowd of bodies surrounding where they are about to like perform surgery on her, which, spoiler alert, is not going to go well for her. She is going to die. And it's just it's such a beautiful, like, expressive moment of like the fear and the horror of this moment.
And I like that they have a moment between her and Doc as well, where it ends in sadness, of course, but there is a caring moment where I think he says it's like, this is going to hurt like blazes, yell, scream, holler, anything you'd like. And he says it with this very soft, concerned, caring tone. And it was just as sad as it is, because it is like kind of a last moment. It's at least a little bit better than their constant fighting that they've been that we've been seeing prior. And I think it's just a moment for Doc where he realizes, like, oh wow, she, this was someone incredibly important to me, and I want to at least try to comfort her in this these last moments.
Yeah. It's actually reckoning with these characters, realizing and contemplating the things that they like mean to one another, and having that come out of these horrible situations, like her, getting shot and killed by Billy, and then having to, get into the sequence where they actually chase down the Clanton brothers. Which, by the way, Eddie, you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong here, because I've only seen, I think, 9 John Fords, and that might sound like a lot, but it's not. The dude made a million films, so. I don't think I've ever seen a moment as like just blatantly shocking and undignified and inhuman as the moment where Virgil gets shot by the shotgun by Mr. Clanton.
It's so quick and cold.
Tim Holt, playing the second youngest Earp boy, Virgil Earp, goes to check on the Clanton boy who shot Chihuahua, and he's dying, and so it's like this somber thing where it's like, I guess, reconciliation with this family. People are just killing each other. We have to just take care of each other more. And then he just gets shot in the back by fucking Walter
saying,
Brennan.
Too bad it had to end this way. Like, I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Clanton.
Yeah.
And
old man Clanton, Walter Brennan, just has a shotgun on his lap and just shoots him in the back. And honestly,
but it's the framing of it. It's the fact that Virgil is like walking out the door towards the camera, and then he just shotgun shot, he falls, and then that reveals with the lighting in the room that he is with the shotgun, and he falls so fast. It's so shocking, and he gets no chance to it feels like all of this this life just stripped away immediately because Mr. Clanton just literally does not give a shit about it at all. It's a horrible moment.
Yeah.
There are moments that swing that dramatically in the Ford filmography, but nothing that savage in terms of shooting him in the back after saying, I'm sorry, it had to end this way. But trust me, if you take down some more Ford masterpieces, you will get that feeling many a times. Like the ending of The Long Gray Line, I think, is like one of the most insane things I've ever seen in a movie. There's a flashback that's kind of similar to in Once Upon a Time in the West that informs the entirety of the character's purpose. And that's in The Quiet Man, where he went back and filmed in Ireland with John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara. There are plenty of John Ford masterpieces that will just like have a moment or two that just fucking knock you out of your shoes, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Damn. Yeah, well, I'm going to have to check them out because I find the ending of this, because of how much time we spend generously with these people developing respect and the emotional lives and expressing that, it does make the violence sting harder, even though from the very beginning that it's coming. The setup, the history of this moment, and that it's coming. But there's still something so crazy about seeing the arc of Doc Holliday, who is this very, he is a chaotic force, but only because it's an expression of his own pain and inner turmoil. And then you get him coming to kind of come around on that. And instead of becoming a destructive force briefly, he tries to become a life preserving force and literally tries to perform surgery on Chihuahua. And then, he kind of comes around, and they even say we're really proud of you, John. She was a really brave girl. And then he attends the shootout and just gets fucking murdered.
Yeah.
No,
just in time to want to live life again. It's crazy.
Well,
Very
because
sad.
he knows he's going to die from his tuberculosis anyway. And instead of drinking himself to death, at least let's go out with a purpose, And so he joins up with the Earp Boys for the shootout at the OK Corral.
Yeah, because they throw Virgil's corpse in the fucking streets at
just
them.
Insulting.
And that shot of the reveal of that to the other Earp Boys, where Fonda gets down on a knee and holds Virgil's head in his hand, and Ward Bond is standing by. He can't even look at it. He is just he's the oldest of the brothers, it seems, and he is just how have I let this happen to my younger brothers? And so him, Henry Fonda, and Doc Holliday, Victor Mature, go up against the Clanton boys. And when Doc Holliday gets killed, he is leaning up against a post. It's almost like the way that people shoot jail cell shots often, where he's imprisoned by these posts at the OK Corral, and he is waving his white handkerchief. He has his white handkerchief, and in the wind, it's waving like a white flag. He's finally he's okay, I've done enough harm to this world. I've tried to do some good here. He fires one last shot at one of the fucking Clanton boys and gets him, and just dies. But that image of him with his one hand up against the post and the other hand with the white handkerchief is just so poetic and sad to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also love, and speaking a little bit about Once Upon a Time in the West, that long shot of them just slowly approaching with no score. Dude. It's the same thing. It's the ambient thing. You hear, you just see that you see the wooden fencing kind of blocking the landscape a little bit, and then they're just walking along these dusty streets. You hear them stepping on the wood plank porches and walking along the alleys and everything. It's very calm. It's very waiting, and he's being we're going to serve a warrant for this guy's arrest. I'm not even going to kill this guy. Wyatt isn't even going for specific personal revenge. He's I'm the marshal. I'm doing that first. And then they get into the big gunfight, which is incredibly framed, through the dust and the horses interrupting the framing and everything like that. It's incredible.
Oh my God. Yeah. And that 30-second sequence of them walking up with no score or anything, and the suspense that builds, I feel those 30 seconds are what Leone made into 10-minute sequences, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
But
Which is
after
incredible that someone could
final
do that
gunfight-
and like you basically be just as enthralled by them.
Yeah. So after the aftermath of the final gunfight, they kick Walter Brennan out of town, which is hilarious because he's obviously not going to give up. He like faux surrenders, and they are like, "Get out of town!" And then as he's walking away, he turns around and tries to shoot them, and Ward Bond just fucking clicks him 3 times, just like knocking the hammer back with his opposite hand, the awesome way of old timey shooting, and shoots him dead, and then. You don't even.
I also love the reasoning for not killing him too, though. Where Henry Fonda, he delivers this line super well, where he's just like, "Get out of town and live 100 years so that you can feel what my pa does."
Oh my god, dude!
because they murdered all of his sons in the gunfight.
Yeah. Oh my god,
So
so
good.
good. So then he gets like. After that, you just immediately go back to good times. It's like, all right, let's go say bye to everyone in town and have a good time again. And everyone's like, oh, thank you, Wyatt Earp. I love you so much.
Me
It's
and
like
my
the end of
brothers were
Star
obliged
Wars.
to you.
Clementine's gonna
literally-
stay and start a school.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
And but it's saying goodbye to everyone except Clementine, of course. And then he gets his final goodbye to her at these posts that are like you're exiting the town, basically. There's no signage or anything. It's just these wooden posts. That's like a gate kind of. And his brother kind of goes ahead and he stays back and gets off his horse. And they have that interaction and that handshake. And that, you know, if I ever see you again or if I'm ever in town again, I'll look you up kind of thing. And, you know, for a guy like Doc Holliday, who's all about just marshaling with his bros and trying to maintain order, sometimes that is as close as you'll ever get to love, and that's okay for a character like that, you know? That is the most romantic moment of his life, probably, and it's just him shaking hands with the girl, you know?
Yeah, which by the way, I because I know that this was released in a different version, and you can now watch the pre-release version that came on the Criterion Blu-ray of the film that got re-released. But the original version, because they made him reshoot it, right? That he had to go and he had them like
to
kiss.
shoot a kiss,
Yes.
Right. And they struck that from like that was in the pre-release version. It wasn't the kiss, and then so if you watch. The best version to watch is on the Criterion Blu-ray, and it's the version that was by the UCLA Library, their restoration of it. And it's actually quite a grainy print. Like, there's a lot of scratches on the print and stuff like that, but it looks amazing.
It still looks amazing, and also it does remove like the theatrical put like some more like cutesy music rather than like the ambience and the patience, and it's. And this ending, I think, is the most important part because it's exactly what Eddie's saying. Like, this is a huge romantic moment, and he's just like shaking hands with a woman who's like town. You know, she might now construct to be something better than what it was when he rode into town. Now that he's leaving, he's hoping anyway that that's what she's going to be capable of doing by leaving it in her hands in a way. But he just like shakes her hand, and it says so much.
And much like Once Upon a Time in the West. It's Henry Fonda here instead of Charles Bronson riding into the sunset, and a woman taking a large responsibility in the progress of a town, you know?
Yes. Yeah, they have the same ending.
It's amazing. It doesn't get much better than this, the cinema.
Yeah, and that shot, too, of her just, like, standing alone as you actually see Fonda join his brother way off in the distance, because it's just this grand-scale landscape shot.
Darling.
Oh, yeah, it's beautiful. Really beautiful stuff.
Yeah, that long shot. He really saves the Monument Valley stuff for, like, the really spectacular long shots that he does.
He's so specific with his backgrounds, too. Like, when when Clementine and Wyatt are talking for the last time, and it's just kind of, like... it's a very symmetrical shot, but in the background you can see all of these like tall rocks, and they're all placed like in between them perfectly. It's just so well composed.
Yeah, he's so precise, and he operates on such a poetic level that he can't explain it. Like, it's not logical. It's just what works for the sake of art. There's that story of Steven Spielberg meeting John Ford when he was young and first was like getting on backlots and stuff like that. And John Ford was like, so you want to be an artist? And he turns around and like looks at a painting, a Western painting that John Ford had in his office. and I think he asked Spielberg like where the horizon line was on it, and Spielberg pointed it out. And ever since I heard that story, I've thought about where Ford places his horizon lines. Anytime anytime I'm looking at a wide exterior shot, and it's never arbitrary. There's always a reason for the elevation and high or low angle and what rock formations, mountains, or just flat horizon he's capturing in the background of these characters. And I don't know, it's more than a storybook ending. It's more than a Hollywood ending. The ending transcends medium. It's just like one of the most beautiful romantic expressions I've ever seen in any art form, honestly.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Hell yeah. Well, pivoting towards reductive rating round. This one is a 5 for me as well. This is just, for me, I've only seen, like 9 or 10 Ford films, and I've given quite a few of them the 5, but this is probably my favorite Ford that I've seen. I find it part of that is I find it incredibly easy to put on and just want to spend time in its world, like the bars and the barbershops and the dancing and the music. And like, I really love the life and the patience and the, like that very specific kind of relaxed, passive, dreamy quality that it has with its characters. And then how that is literally used as a direct symbolic counterpoint to the lamplit shadows of this, this fatalistic, tragic town that has so much, destruction, and with the holiday self-destruction, and it's a haunted place of questionable moral values when he rides into it, and when he leaves, he hopes that it's going to be made into a better place. But it is very telling that we don't see that happen. It does remind me of when he's sitting at the grave, and it's just a hope, it's a dream. It's like he talks to his dead brother's grave that he sets up and says, hopefully one day there will be a place where young people like you aren't just like killed pointlessly and sadistically by people like this for no reason. That instead we would have incredible Henry Fonda high knee kick dancing. And I think that surprisingly is like such a deeply felt thing in this film, this community versus this inhuman greed that's like bubbling up, and the fact that he just, he's confident enough to not have to, feel like he needs to underline and underscore every element of that. He's like, no, you should just spend time with these people and have that feel like it naturally arises from them. Yeah, like it feels like it just naturally comes out of these characters and the lives that they live. Like it really, they do feel like living, breathing people. Yeah. Even though this does have kind of like a post-war bleak, fatalistic, tragic aspect to it that's still there. And I just find it so interesting that John Ford found a way to, fight that off through, both the way that he shot it, which sometimes he's expressing the darkness, sometimes expressing the lightness. It's that dichotomy constantly that's fighting, but also with just incredible performances and the way that he shoots actors' faces and the way that they look at each other. It's filled with so much yearning and passion. And yeah, I get a lot out of this, and yeah, it is just personally one of my favorite John Fords that I've seen. So pretty easy 5 for me as well. And also I wanted to mention the last note that I had written here that I wanted to say because I didn't get a chance to bring it up naturally. People who have cited this as one of their all-time favorite films that you should know. Obviously, we can probably include Leone on the list based on how much he references it, but Sam Peckinpah, who is someone who also would go and, kind of take this genre to task in different ways, but someone who also very clearly, naturally loved it. Like you see that in The Wild Bunch. Michael Mann and President Harry S. Truman. I just wanted to get that last one in there. So we are all like those great men.
That's awesome. Right now, I think
speaking of the American qualities,
Yeah. Right now, I think I'm going to go just with a very, very, very strong 4, the Jamie 4. TM.
I'm so glad I'm here for a Jamie 4.
Yes. The only reason is just because this is my second John Ford, and I'm not very familiar with classic Westerns yet. And so I just want to dive in a little more before I start deciding what I think is my masterpieces, right? So... but I mean, I love this. I think the photography is beautiful. Like we were saying, I love that one scene where they utilize rain when they find the brother's dead body. It's just so sad and dark and haunting. I love the way they also use not just natural light, but like lantern light. Like there's a really great moment where it's after Chihuahua passes away and they're talking about her at the bar, and Mac, the bartender, eventually, as they're leaving, takes the lantern and it just completely gets rid of all of the lighting, and it goes completely black basically, except for the light that you can see at the end of the bar as he's walking towards the exit. And it's just beautiful. It's just so well thought out, and it does kind of accent a little bit of the sadness of loss, but then having to move forward, and it's just in that one shot, and I thought that was great. And there's obviously tons of examples like that. So I just need to watch more Ford. So I'm going to do that, going to make it a priority.
Yeah, Jamie's going to get a boot. He's going to prop it up against a beam, sit in a chair, and he's going to Clockwork Orange himself through all the classic Westerns.
Yes.
And, honestly, if absolutely. Jamie rewatches this and doesn't give it a 5 next time, we're putting him on a post and riding him around town.
Only once.
Yeah, only once.
We gotta be fair.
Can't be cruel about it. But yeah, fantastic. So I imagine this will get the 5 eventually, but I just need more time.
This is the easy 5 for me. This is like, I think I've said this on Twitter or something before. It's the greatest film I've ever seen, and also like my 4th favorite John Ford movie. It's the man was too good at making movies. I think we've said enough on what this film does and how it achieves it. And I just want to say, if you haven't watched more John Ford films, do so. These are my final thoughts on My Darling Clementine, is that somehow it doesn't reach the heights of The Long Gray Line or Wagon Master or The Searchers for me. The Long Gray Line is like, to quote Jean-Marie Straub, now that's an experimental film. The Long Gray Line just shows Tyrone Power's life in the military academy, from, a young recruit to an old dying man who's seen everyone in his life die around him, and all he's known is a commitment to the U.S. military, which is very apropos for John Ford, who is a U.S. military man. You can also see films that he directed for the U.S. military, such as a sex hygiene film, so that soldiers didn't get STDs in the war, as well as like the official propaganda capturings of like the Battle of Midway. The Battle of Midway, that propaganda film, that's credited as directed by John Ford. So then you watch something like The Wings of Eagles, which is about you could get a lesson in just American history, just like watching and the history of the medium by starting watching his early 1910 silent era stuff up to the 60s, and you could basically the first half of the 20th century you could probably get America's story out of John Ford's filmography. So definitely worth looking into it. Yeah, sorry to go so long on this. I was just going to say The Wings of Eagles, literally about giving yourself over to the military and Hollywood making military propaganda, where you have Ward Bond from this film playing like a John Ford stand-in almost, as John Wayne goes from being like a famous pilot to being a guy who writes Hollywood movies about the military.
That's interesting.
And it's just watch John Ford movies. 5.
Yeah, all of them. Especially too if you're really into revisionist stuff and you do wonder, like, you want to actually see the things that they were responding to, because a lot of time people will talk about revisionist Westerns as like the ones that finally got thematically serious. And it's just not true. Like you go back and you watch the old Hollywood ones, a lot of these guys were talking about many of the same ideas. They just weren't able to be or maybe didn't want to be as, frequently as vulgar as those, filmmakers were able to start being in the 60s and 70s. Yeah. But like this has, like all of the beats of a righteous, heroic Western in every way, classical, but it does still really feel low key and downbeat. And
there is a sadness here that I wasn't expecting. For sure.
Yeah, it is like investigating a lot of these things that it is also building the myths for at the same time. And I think a lot of people sometimes don't necessarily, realize that. I mean, most people hopefully will have seen The Searchers, which, Jamie, that should probably be the next one you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just one of the best. So, actually, everyone watch up on John Ford.
The Searchers is low-key kind of racist.
Eddie.
We're gonna start this debate now.
No. It is as easy a 5 as any of his movies. It's one of the greatest films of all time.
I can't wait.
Yeah, that last shot of it, I mean, it's iconic for a reason, but I do think about it just like regularly, in the framing of the doorway and the shadows. And
of course. Who could forget? And maybe I'll retweet this old tweet when the episode comes out, but also who could forget in Eddie history when I was in grad school and they did a side-by-side comparison of that last shot from The Searchers with Captain America at the funeral at the end of Infinity War or whatever that was, when he's like standing in the doorway a similar way. Good times in academia. So by the way, that's really if I'm going to plug anything, it's to drop out of grad school if you're in it.
That's the plug.
That's what we're encouraging on this show today. You get anything from this 2.5-hour episode, that is it.
It's so funny. I remember, Eddie, you telling me that story too. It's unbelievable. Like, even you put those two things side by side, like just the framing and the lighting. Come on, guys. Come the fuck on.
So funny.
Get real. Watch John Ford movies instead of going to school.
That's right. That feels like a good place to wrap it up. That was Once Upon a Time in the West from 1968, as well as My Darling Clementine from 1946. Thanks so much once again, Eddie, for joining us and for bringing these films with you and going along with us on these. This is the part where obviously we have you things plugged. You've already plugged your first thing. Don't go to grad school. Watch John Ford films. But if you've got anything else to plug while you're around, is there anything going on in Eddie world that we should know about?
Oh, let's see. There are plenty of. You could see my work on television.
That's right.
I might get an on-screen credit for this job that I'm on right now, but I'm taking it easy these days in terms of the creative stuff. I'm just working.
My boy's on sets.
Yeah. I work as a set dresser in Hollywood now instead of doing podcasts. But I might do another one, honestly. I've been toying around some ideas. It wouldn't be a regular show, like weekly, because I can't do that anymore. That's why we ended Extended Clip.
Would it be kind of random, like whenever you can?
Yeah, like it would be, I would probably do like record a bunch, like record like a season when I have a couple weeks off of work and then release those sporadically, Yeah. But it's still in the gestating stages. I'm still just fucking kicking shit around in my apartment. But anyway, what I'm actually going to plug is you can listen to my old podcast, Extended Clip. It was me, JT White, a former guest of this podcast, and Malcolm Baum, hopefully future guest of this podcast. We did it for like fucking 2.5 years, and there's plenty of, all the Patreon episodes are free on the main feed, and you can fucking listen to it. It's, I'm printing the legend. Extended Clip was better than whatever other film I've listened to these other film podcasts. They're fucking horrible. Like, you guys are burning the torch at both ends just to make a great podcast, but like these other guys, what are you doing? I heard this one from New York that was like, I'm not going to get into details, but like, Jesus Christ, man, learn a little bit about movies. Anyway, so listen to Extended Clip for a good movie podcast. I'm still on Twitter at iPod Video. I'm still on Letterboxd, letterboxd.com. Just look up Eddie on Letterboxd. I'm the first one that comes up. And
he's the only Eddie.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Eddie. For our listeners, we are going to be back in 1 week's time, where we are going to be finally moving away from Western Month here on the show that just happened. And we are going to be talking about sexploitation, which we've kind of covered on the periphery a little bit. Things like we've talked about Andy Milligan. We did sort of like women in prison films. And we've done some stuff that are in the sexploitation genre, but we are going straight back to the originals by talking about Doris Wishman, who was one of the few female filmmakers who got to work in a very for men, by men genre where naked women were on the posters. And as long as that was the case and they were topless at some point in the film, you could make whatever you wanted from there. So we're going to be talking her film, Bad Girls Go to Hell, which is almost her variation on a sort of like domestic hysteria, repulsion kind of style film in that genre, which is one of her early films from 65.
That's
after she was done doing her... Cool. Yeah, and it was after doing her nudist films that she did. And then we're going to bypass her weirdo 70s era where she did films with Chesty Morgan, the woman with a 73-inch bust who used her boobs to kill women.
Those.
We're going to do them at some point, but we're
Chesty Morgan, her and I actually had a thing, but it's like not a big deal.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Can't talk about it. We're going to bypass her 70s phase and go straight to one of her final films, other than her very late 2000 stuff she did as, in her 80s and 90s, a film called A Night to Dismember.
Classic. Classic alert.
Yes. So we are going to be, which was her attempt post Halloween at doing a slasher, and spoiler alert, like losing half the film negative in the process and basically having to re-edit it and save it into something. And as a result, it feels like just incredible surreal film. Nonsense.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But it's amazing and gory, and she's an exploitation legend. So we're going to be excited to talk about that. And then in 2 weeks' time, we are going to be back with a special guest where we are going to be talking sort of in relation to Doris Wishman. We're going to be talking about more female filmmakers. We're going to be talking about Italian girl bosses doing World War II films. We're going to be talking about The Seven Beauties, as well as a film called The Skin. Now, I haven't seen either of these films, but I've been promised by our guest that they are really underseen and really amazing.
Yeah, The Skin is hard to find.
I gotta say, Seven Beauties in the Skin was going to be Hessa's next double feature that she brought to extended clip. So I'm not saying you guys are stealing
Dude,
our
it's
swag.
Poetry. It rhymes.
It rhymes, yeah. So I can't believe that you guys are having me on in between Jason and Hessa, because like I went to New York recently and those were the only two people I met up with. Jason and Hessa were my fucking NYC tour guides. We hung out at Dime Square.
Oh, baby.
We went to fucking Clandestino and Metrograph. It was sick. I love both of them. They're awesome.
Yeah, we've got the crew.
Yeah, we should have all of you on at some point. Get you guys on the couch. Get you guys with your mics going.
Episode.
Yeah.
That would be a little too much to handle. I think we would have to put that behind like a $30 paywall.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We'd have to go Rogan on that. Go like 5 hours.
Yeah, but yeah, that'll wrap it up for everything this week. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.
That was sexy.